This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I still can't explain what happened that day. It's been 3 months since my grandmother Amara passed away, but sometimes I feel like she never really left us. I've never been the type to believe in the supernatural. I'm usually the first person to look for logical explanations when weird stuff happens. But after what our family experienced, I don't know what to believe anymore. Amara was the heart of our family. Everyone in Tanjung knew her. She was that grandmother who'd feed the entire neighborhood if she could. When the doctor told us she had stage 4 lung cancer, it felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. She declined so quickly after that. Within 2 months, she was gone. In our culture, it's customary to bring the body home before the funeral so family and friends can pay their respects. The funeral home delivered Grandma's body to her house the day before the service. I remember how surreal it felt seeing the hearse pull up to her driveway. The same driveway where she used to wait for us with open arms whenever we visited. My mom, aunts, and uncles had dressed her in her favorite blue kabaya. This traditional blouse she always wore on special occasions. They also placed her old Nokia phone in the coffin beside her. That phone was practically attached to her hand when she was alive. She'd call each grandchild every week without fail to check if we were eating properly or needed anything. My uncle joked that she'd probably want to call us from heaven too. The coffin was placed in the living room with the lid open and surrounded by flowers. The front door was kept open all day for visitors. People from all over Tanjung came. Neighbors, old friends, even the guy who delivered her groceries for years. That's how loved she was. The weird stuff started around 11 in the morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee for some of the visitors when suddenly everything went dark. At first, I thought it was just another power outage. They're pretty common in Tanjung during the rainy season. But when my uncle checked the electrical panel in the back of the house, he found the main switch turned off. "That's strange," he said, flipping it back on. "Who would turn this off?" We brushed it off as someone accidentally hitting the switch while looking for the bathroom. But about an hour later it happened again, and then again. By the end of the day, we had experienced 7 blackouts, each time the main switch was found in the off position. My cousin Devi suggested it might be some electrical issue causing the switch to flip automatically. But our uncle, who works as an electrician, checked the entire system and found nothing wrong. Plus, this house never had electrical problems before. "Maybe it's Grandma," my 5-year-old brother Marcus whispered to me during the 5th blackout. "Maybe she's playing with the lights." I ruffled his hair and told him not to say things like that in front of Mom. She was already struggling enough with the grief. But then something even stranger happened. Around 3 in the afternoon, my Aunt Indra came running into the living room, her face white as a sheet. "Did anyone just use Amara's phone?" she asked, her voice shaking. We all looked at each other, confused. The phone was still there in the coffin, untouched beside Grandma's folded hands. "I just got a missed call from her number," Aunt Indra said, showing us her call log. Sure enough, there was a missed call from Amara at 2:58 p.m. "You must have imagined it," my father said, always the rational one. "Or maybe it's a glitch in your phone." But then my uncle's phone rang. He pulled it out of his pocket, stared at the screen, and nearly dropped it. It was Grandma's number calling. The call ended before he could answer. By evening, 5 different family members had received calls from Grandma's phone. Each time the call would ring once or twice, then end before anyone could pick up. And each time we checked, the phone was still in the coffin, powered off. My mom suggested we remove the battery, but my oldest aunt stopped her. "If it's Amara trying to reach us," she said quietly, "let her." That night, most of the family stayed at Grandma's house. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those phone calls, about the lights going on and off. Was Grandma really trying to communicate with us, or was grief making us imagine things? The funeral the next day was beautiful, but heartbreaking. So many people came that some had to stand outside the hall. Everyone had a story about how Grandma had helped them or made them laugh. We buried her in the cemetery overlooking the sea. She always said she wanted to hear the waves in her eternal sleep. I thought the strange occurrences would end after the funeral. They didn't. 2 days after we laid Grandma to rest, my parents decided we should clean out her house. My cousin Ravi volunteered to stay there in the morning while the rest of us went to get cleaning supplies and boxes for packing. We spent hours shopping, buying probably more than we needed, but none of us was in a hurry to start the painful process of sorting through Grandma's belongings. It was nearly 4 in the afternoon when we headed back. As we approached her house, I realized something. "Dad," I said, "do you have the remote for Grandma's gate?" Her house had this heavy iron gate that could be opened manually, but most of the time we used a remote because the gate was so cumbersome. Dad patted his pockets, then groaned. "I left it on the kitchen counter this morning," he said. "I'll call Ravi to open it for us," Mom said, pulling out her phone. But before she could dial, something impossible happened. The gate began to slide open on its own. We all stared, stunned into silence. The gate moved slowly but steadily until it was completely open. "Ravi must have seen us coming," Dad said, though there was uncertainty in his voice. The house had no front windows facing the gate, and the control panel was inside the house. We drove in and parked. As we unloaded the car, I noticed Marcus looking at something by the gate. He was smiling and waving. "Who are you waving at?" I asked him. "Grandma," he said simply. "She's standing by the gate. She opened it for us." A chill ran down my spine. I looked where he was pointing but saw nothing. Inside, we found Ravi just waking up on the couch, looking disoriented. He'd been napping, he explained, exhausted from a night shift at the hospital where he worked. "Thanks for opening the gate for us," my mom said. The color drained from Ravi's face. "I didn't open the gate." "Of course you did," Dad insisted. "It opened as we arrived." Ravi sat up straight now, fully awake. "I swear I didn't. I was asleep." "Then how did it open?" I asked. "The remote was here in the house." Ravi looked uncomfortable. "I had this dream just now," he said slowly. "Grandma was sitting right here next to me on the couch. She stroked my hair the way she used to when I was sick as a kid. She told me everyone would be home soon, and not to worry, she would open the gate herself." My mom dropped into a chair, her legs seemingly unable to hold her anymore. "I saw Grandma at the gate," Marcus repeated, more insistent this time. "She was smiling and waving at us. She had on her blue dress, the blue kabaya we'd buried her in." Later that evening, as we sorted through Grandma's belongings in near silence, each lost in our own thoughts, I found a notebook in her bedside drawer. It was her journal. Most entries were mundane. Notes about her garden, recipes she wanted to try, reminders to call certain grandchildren. But the last entry, dated just 3 days before she died, made my hands tremble. "I worry about them all when I'm gone," she had written in her shaky handwriting, "especially when they come to clean out the house. I know it will be hard for them. If only I could still be here somehow, to open the gate for them one last time, to let them know it's okay to move on, but that I'll always watch over them." We never told anyone outside the family about what happened that day. Who would believe us? Sometimes I still wonder if there's some logical explanation for everything. A power surge, a phone glitch, someone else with access to the gate remote. But deep down, I know what I experienced. The strangest part is, I'm not afraid anymore. At first, the idea that Grandma was somehow still present terrified me. Now, it's oddly comforting. Just last week, I was alone in my apartment, crying over some photos of Grandma I'd found. My bedside lamp flickered 3 times in quick succession, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I smelled her jasmine perfume. Some might say grief makes us imagine things. Maybe they're right, but I can't explain the gate opening by itself or those phone calls from a powered-off device. I can't explain why Marcus saw Grandma in her blue kebaya, and I definitely can't explain how she knew days before her death that she would need to open that gate for us. All I know is that Grandma Amara promised all her life that she'd always be there for us, and somehow, some way, she kept that promise, even after death. Her love was just too strong to be contained by something as simple as dying. Sometimes at night I talk to her just in case she's listening, and sometimes, just sometimes, the lights flicker in response. A coincidence, perhaps, but a comforting one. Story 2. I still get chills thinking about what happened last year. I moved to Maple Street in October, thinking I'd found my dream home. It was the perfect size, in a quiet neighborhood with tree-lined streets and well-kept lawns. The real estate agent gushed about the wonderful community feel and how everyone looked out for each other. The price was right too, almost suspiciously good, but I chalked it up to lucky timing in the market. The first few days were everything I'd hoped for. People brought welcome baskets, introduced themselves while I was unpacking, and genuinely seemed happy to have a new neighbor. Everyone except the McPhersons next door, house number 24, directly to my right. While my other neighbors would wave or stop to chat when they saw me outside, the McPhersons never acknowledged my existence. I tried not to take it personally. Some people just prefer privacy, right? But something about them felt off from the beginning. I remember the first time I saw Mr. McPherson clearly. I was planting some flowers in my front yard when he came out to get his mail. I called out a friendly, "Good morning," and he just stared at me. Not angrily or anything, just this empty gaze that lasted way too long before he turned and went back inside without a word. His movements were stiff, almost robotic. Mrs. McPherson was rarely seen outside, but occasionally I'd catch a glimpse of her through their kitchen window, always in the same spot, always looking straight ahead at nothing in particular. Their blinds were almost always drawn, even during beautiful sunny days when everyone else had their windows open. About a week after moving in, I woke up around 2 in the morning, desperately needing water after having too many glasses of wine that evening. As I stumbled to the kitchen, something caught my eye through the window overlooking their backyard. Both Mr. and Mrs. McPherson were standing in their yard, completely still, in the middle of the night, just standing there with their backs to me, facing their house. No flashlights, no conversation, nothing. Just two dark silhouettes standing motionless in the moonlight. I nearly dropped my glass. I stood there frozen, watching them for maybe 5 minutes, but they didn't move at all. Eventually, I crept back to bed, convinced I was overreacting or maybe still half asleep, but I couldn't shake the image from my mind. The next day, I decided to ask around about them. Marla, the sweet older lady who lived across the street, was watering her roses when I approached her. "Oh, the McPhersons. They've lived here for years. Keep to themselves mostly," she said, suddenly becoming very interested in a specific rose bush. "How are you settling in? Did you find that hardware store I recommended?" I noticed how quickly she changed the subject, but pressed on anyway. "Do they ever participate in neighborhood events? I was thinking of hosting a small get-together soon." Marla's smile tightened. "I wouldn't count on them showing up. They've never come to anything before." She lowered her voice slightly. "Listen, honey, don't take it personally. That's just how they are." Then she straightened up and spoke in her normal voice again. "Now, about that hardware store." Her reaction only made me more curious. Why was she so uncomfortable talking about them? What did she know that I didn't? Over the next few weeks, I noticed more strange things. Their trash cans would be full on collection day, but I never once saw either of them drag them to the curb or bring them back. Yet somehow they'd be emptied and returned to their spot beside the garage. Their mail would pile up for days, then suddenly disappear all at once. The lights in their house would turn on and off at exactly the same times every day, like they were on timers. I started keeping notes in my phone, times, dates, weird observations. I'm not normally this nosy, but something about them just wasn't right, and it was starting to affect me. I'd lie awake at night listening for sounds from their house. I'd find myself peering through my blinds at odd hours, hoping to catch a glimpse of whatever they were doing. One Tuesday around midday, I saw Mr. McPherson get into his car. It was the first time I'd seen him leave the house in over a week. His movements were jerky, his face expressionless as always. He backed out of the driveway, and as he passed my house, our eyes met for a brief second. I felt a cold sensation wash over me. His eyes were empty, like looking into two black holes. That night around 3 in the morning, I woke up to loud banging from next door. It wasn't rhythmic like construction, more like something heavy being moved or dropped repeatedly. Then I heard muffled voices, frantic and arguing. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was unmistakably urgent. I crept to my bedroom window, which gave me a partial view of their backyard. In the dim glow of their porch light, I saw Mr. McPherson dragging something across the yard toward a small shed near the back fence. A large black plastic bag, the heavy-duty kind used for yard waste. But whatever was inside wasn't yard waste. It was too heavy, too awkward for him to drag. He struggled with it, stopping several times to readjust his grip. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to look away, to go back to bed and forget what I was seeing, but I couldn't move. I watched as he finally got the bag to the shed, unlocked it, and shoved the bag inside. Before closing the door, he looked around nervously, the first real emotion I'd ever seen him display. I ducked away from the window, certain he couldn't see me through my blinds, but terrified nonetheless. I barely slept that night, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them good. The next day, I called in sick to work. I couldn't focus, couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. Around noon, I noticed Mr. McPherson in the backyard again. This time, he was digging near the shed. By evening, there was a fresh patch of dirt about 3 feet long and 2 feet wide. Too small for a full-grown person, I tried to reassure myself. Maybe they had a pet that died, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible had happened. After agonizing over it for hours, I called the police. I tried to sound calm as I explained my concerns, but the officer seemed skeptical. "So you're saying your neighbors are quiet, keep to themselves, and you saw the husband taking out trash and doing yard work?" He made it sound so normal, so innocent. "No, it wasn't regular trash. It was a heavy black bag in the middle of the night. And now there's a freshly dug patch near their shed," I insisted. They said they'd send someone to check it out. 2 officers showed up the next morning. I watched from my window as they knocked on the McPherson's door. Mrs. McPherson answered, the first time I'd seen her outside the house. She smiled and nodded, inviting them in. They were inside for less than 10 minutes before leaving, waving goodbye like old friends. One of the officers stopped by my house afterward. "Everything seems fine, Mom. They said they buried their old dog that passed away recently, 15-year-old beagle named Rusty." I nodded and thanked him, but I knew they were lying. In all my weeks there, I'd never seen or heard a dog at their house. No barking, no dog supplies delivered, nothing. That night the noises started again, scratching sounds, things being dragged across floors, muffled arguments, and the patch of dirt by the shed. It seemed to be getting bigger. I started having trouble sleeping. Every noise jolted me awake. I installed a security camera facing my backyard, angled so it could partially see theirs too. During the day, I'd review the footage, looking for anything unusual. Most nights showed nothing, but occasionally I'd catch glimpses of one or both of them in their yard at odd hours, always near that shed. About 2 weeks after the police visit, I woke up around 2:30 in the morning to the sound of shattering glass and a blood-curdling scream from the McPherson house. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window. Through their kitchen window, I could see a struggle. Shadows moving violently, things being knocked over. Then the back door flew open, and Mr. McPherson emerged, dragging another black bag. This one was thrashing. I fumbled for my phone with shaking hands and called 911. "My neighbors, I think someone's being hurt. They're screaming and fighting." I could barely form coherent sentences. While waiting for the police, I kept watching, horrified but unable to look away. The bag had stopped moving. Mr. McPherson was heading for the shed again, but stopped suddenly and looked up at my window. Even from that distance, I could feel his gaze. I dropped to the floor, my whole body trembling. The police arrived within minutes. This time they didn't knock politely. They forced their way in after no one answered. I watched from behind my curtains as more patrol cars arrived, then an ambulance, then unmarked vehicles with people in plain clothes who I assumed were detectives. Hours later, as the sky began to lighten, they brought someone out on a stretcher, not in a body bag, but clearly alive. Then Mr. and Mrs. McPherson, handcuffed and separated, were put into different patrol cars. I later learned the horrifying truth from a detective who came to take my statement. The McPhersons had been keeping someone captive in their basement for years. A young woman reported missing from a town about 30 miles away. The freshly dug earth wasn't for her, thankfully. It was where they'd buried evidence. Bloody clothing, restraints, things too awful to think about. The detective said they'd never have found her if I hadn't called that night. She might have ended up like the others. There had been others before her. The McPhersons' house stood empty for months afterward. Eventually, it was sold to a nice young couple with a baby on the way. They tore down the shed right away, poured a concrete patio instead. They had no idea why I could never bring myself to attend their backyard barbecues. I still live on Maple Street. Everyone says time will heal the trauma, that eventually I'll stop hearing those muffled screams in my dreams, stop seeing those empty eyes staring back at me. Maybe they're right, but sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear scratching coming from under that concrete patio next door. And on certain nights, when the moon is high and the neighborhood is silent, I find myself drawn to my window, watching for shadows that shouldn't be there. Because the detective never did explain why the dirt kept expanding after they buried whatever was in those bags, or why, to this day, strange noises still come from that spot where the shed once stood. Story 3. I still can't bring myself to sleep in a room with sheer curtains. It's been over 4 years, but whenever I see moonlight filtering through thin fabric, my heart starts racing, and I get that same sick feeling in my stomach. I've tried therapy, meditation, even those stupid essential oil diffusers my mom keeps buying me. Nothing helps. I know what I saw that night in my sister's house, and it wasn't a dream or sleep paralysis like everyone keeps suggesting. This happened back in April of 2019. My sister Kate had just bought her first house in Lakewood, a cute little bungalow with a fenced yard and way too many windows. She was so proud of it, giving us the grand tour when we arrived, pointing out all the character features and the new appliances she'd splurged on. The place was built in the 1940s with all those quirky little details old houses have: creaky hardwood floors, glass doorknobs, and these weird little alcoves that serve no purpose. My friend Hannah and I were staying the weekend to help Kate unpack and organize. We'd known each other since college, and Hannah was basically family at this point. Kate had set us up in the guest room, which wasn't fully furnished yet. There was just a single bed with a trundle bed underneath that pulled out. The room was small, painted this soft pale blue color, with a single window that faced the driveway. The window had these gauzy white tulle curtains that were probably original to the house. They looked delicate and kind of yellowish with age. We'd spent the whole day hauling boxes, assembling furniture, and arranging Kate's massive book collection. By evening, we were exhausted. We ordered pizza, drank a couple beers each, and crashed around 11. Hannah took the trundle bed that pulled out from under mine, so she was sleeping literally right next to me, just slightly lower. I remember feeling so tired that I didn't even bother to wash my face, just fell into bed still wearing my t-shirt and shorts from the day. I'd been sleeping deeply when something just woke me up. You know that feeling when you suddenly become alert for no reason, like your body senses something your conscious mind doesn't. That's what happened. My eyes opened, and I immediately had this overwhelming sensation that someone was in the room with us. The digital clock on the nightstand read 2:43 a.m. The room was mostly dark, but moonlight was streaming through that window, casting this weird bluish glow across everything. And that's when I saw her. There was a figure standing at the window. From my angle in bed, I could clearly make out Hana's profile. Her shoulder-length hair, the slope of her nose, her chin, the oversized t-shirt she wore to bed. She was just standing there, perfectly still, staring out through the half-open curtains. Her face was inches from the glass, her arms hanging stiffly at her sides. At first, I wasn't scared. I figured Hana had gotten up to use the bathroom or get water and had paused to look outside. Maybe she'd heard something in the driveway. "Hana," I whispered, propping myself up on my elbow. "What are you doing?" The figure didn't turn around. Instead, it made this sound, a low, flat hoo-hoo, not like an owl, more like someone imitating an owl but getting it wrong. The sound wasn't loud, but it wasn't exactly a whisper either. It was utterly emotionless and somehow wrong. A little confused, I asked again, "Hana, are you okay? What are you looking at?" Again, without turning, the same response. "Hoo-hoo." Something about that sound made my skin prickle. It wasn't playful or joking. It was mechanical almost, and Hana wasn't moving at all, not even slightly swaying like a normal person would when standing still. She was completely rigid. That's when I glanced down, more out of instinct than anything else. And there was Hana, fast asleep on the trundle bed beside me, her chest rising and falling with deep, even breaths, her arm flung over her face the way she always sleeps. I froze. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. Hana was asleep beside me, but Hana was also standing at the window. I felt this rush of cold fear flood through my entire body, like ice water replacing my blood. My mouth went completely dry. In that moment of dawning horror, I stammered, "Anna?" Not even getting her name right because I was so terrified. That's when the figure at the window snapped its head toward me. Not turned, snapped like footage cutting from one frame to another. 1 second it was facing the window, the next it was staring directly at me. The movement was so sudden and so unnatural that I physically recoiled. Its face looked exactly like Hana's, the same features, the same hair, but the expression was completely wrong. Hana has these warm, expressive eyes that crinkle when she laughs. This thing's eyes were empty. Not just emotionless, but literally empty, like looking into holes in reality. They reflected no light, showed no life. Just cold, dead pits that were somehow focused intensely on me. I screamed. Not a movie scream, but this pathetic, strangled sound that got stuck in my throat. I threw myself back against the wall, knocking my head hard on the plaster. The pain barely registered. The real Hana jerked awake below me, confused and startled. "Miranda, what's wrong? What's happening?" she mumbled, still half asleep. My eyes were locked on the figure by the window, but in the split second that I'd looked away to see the real Hana waking up, the thing had vanished. Just gone. The curtains swayed slightly, as if disturbed by movement, but there was nothing there anymore. I couldn't even form a complete sentence. I was shaking uncontrollably, my teeth literally chattering. "You were, but you weren't. There was something." Hana climbed up onto my bed, grabbing my arms. "Miranda, breathe. You're hyperventilating. What happened? Did you have a nightmare?" I shook my head violently. No, I was awake. I saw you, but it wasn't you standing at the window. But you were here, sleeping. It looked exactly like you." I could see in her face that she thought I'd had a bad dream, but I was completely lucid. I pointed to the window, my hand trembling. It was standing right there, staring out. When I called to it, it made this sound, "hoo-hoo," and then it turned its head so fast, like nothing human could move that way, and its eyes... I started crying at this point, hot tears running down my face. Its eyes were so empty. To her credit, Hana didn't dismiss me outright. She looked genuinely concerned. "Let me check," she said, getting up and walking to the window, exactly where the thing had been standing. "Be careful," I whispered, still pressed against the wall. She pulled the curtains fully open and looked outside. The driveway was empty, just my sister's car parked there, silvery in the moonlight. She checked the lock on the window, secure. Then she closed the curtains completely, tying them together in the middle so there was no gap. "There's nothing out there," she said, coming back to sit on the bed. "The window's locked. We're on the second floor. No one could have been standing there." But I knew what I'd seen. I was fully awake. I could move. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I'd literally watched her sleeping while simultaneously seeing her, or something that looked exactly like her, standing at that window. I couldn't stop shaking. Hannah suggested we go wake up my sister, but I didn't want to freak Kate out on her first night in her new house. Instead, Hannah turned on all the lights in the room and sat with me until sunrise, around 6 a.m. Neither of us slept again that night. The next morning, I told Kate what happened. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a reflection in the glass. Maybe the curtains formed a shape that looked like a person. Maybe I was overtired. But I know what I saw. The thing that bothers me most even now is that, whatever it was, it knew Hannah was there. It chose to look like her specifically. It wasn't random. And those eyes, they weren't just empty. They were hungry somehow, like they wanted something from me. We stayed the full weekend as planned, but I slept on the couch in the living room the next night. Hannah stayed in the guest room alone, which I thought was incredibly brave. When I asked her if anything happened, she just shook her head and changed the subject. To this day, she doesn't like talking about that night. Sometimes I catch her looking at me strangely, like she wants to say something but can't bring herself to. I've researched everything I can find about doppelgangers, sleep phenomena, and hauntings. Nothing quite matches what I experienced. Some cultures believe seeing someone's double is a bad omen, a warning of death or disaster. But it's been 4 years, and Hannah's fine. We're all fine. Except I'm not. Not really. I still wake up sometimes at exactly 2:43 a.m., my heart racing, convinced something is standing at the foot of my bed. I've rearranged my furniture so I can see every corner of my room from my pillow. I sleep with blackout curtains now, taped to the wall so there's not even a sliver of outside visible. My sister still owns that house. She's never experienced anything unusual there. I've visited many times since, but I've never stayed overnight again. I can't, I won't. And I'll never forget the sound of that voice, that flat, hollow hoo-hoo that wasn't an answer but some kind of acknowledgement, like it was letting me know that it saw me seeing it. Sometimes I wonder if it's still there, standing at that window on certain nights, waiting for someone else to wake up and notice it, or worse, if it's found me somehow, and is just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself again. I don't know what it wanted. I don't know what it was, but I know it was real. And sometimes I catch myself staring at Hannah when we're together, looking for any sign that something might be off. Any indication that the thing I saw that night found a way to replace her after all. Story 4. I don't usually share this stuff with anyone. Most people either think I'm making it up or they get that look, where they're trying to figure out if I need professional help. But I've been carrying these memories for 23 years now, and I need to get them out. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can tell me I'm not crazy. I lived in that house from when I was 6 until I was 19, 13 years in what I can only describe as a physical and mental hell. It was a split level on Sycamore Drive, brick on the bottom half, white siding on top, with these weird little windows in the basement that were too small for anyone to fit through. My parents bought it thinking it would be our forever home. I wish they'd been right about that, but for all the wrong reasons. The house itself was unremarkable from the outside. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, a basement my dad half finished before giving up. But from the moment we moved in, something felt wrong. I remember standing in the driveway that first day, holding my stuffed dinosaur and not wanting to go inside. My mom had to practically drag me through the front door. I couldn't explain why, but something in my gut was screaming at me to run. The first few months were normal, I guess. Aside from the constant fighting between my parents, my dad had a temper that could shake the walls, and my mom had mastered the art of crying silently so we wouldn't hear her. My older sister buried herself in books and pretended none of it was happening. I didn't have that ability. The first incident I can clearly remember happened when I was 7. I was walking down the hallway to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Our hallway was long and narrow, with a mirror at the end of it that reflected the doors to all the bedrooms. I remember looking up and seeing something in that mirror that wasn't me. It was tall, much taller than my dad, and it had the head of a goat, or at least what my 7-year-old mind registered as a goat. Long snout, curved horns, eyes that reflected the dim nightlight in the hallway. It was standing right where I was standing, but it wasn't my reflection. I froze, unable to scream, unable to move. It tilted its head, as if curious about me, and then it smiled. I don't know how I knew it was smiling, because goats can't smile, but I knew. And then it was gone, and it was just me in the mirror again, a terrified kid who just peed his pajamas. I ran back to my room and hid under the covers until morning. I tried telling my mom, but she was nursing a bruise on her cheek from where my dad had accidentally hit her with a cabinet door, and she just nodded and told me it was a bad dream. But it wasn't a dream, and it wasn't the last time I saw the goat man. He showed up randomly over the years, always in that mirror, always at night. Sometimes months would go by without an appearance, and I'd start to convince myself I'd imagined him. Then I'd catch a glimpse of him while getting a glass of water at 2 in the morning, and the terror would come flooding back. The goat man wasn't the only thing wrong with that house, though. My sister had a Ouija board she kept hidden in her closet, wrapped in an old t-shirt because our parents would have flipped if they knew about it. I found it once when I was looking for her diary. I was a little shit back then. I remember pulling it out and seeing that there was a perfect circle burned right through the middle of the board and the t-shirt it was wrapped in. Not like someone had taken a lighter to it. This was a clean, precise hole about the size of a quarter that went straight through both items as if they'd been stacked perfectly when it happened. The weird part was that there was no scorch mark around the hole, just a perfect circle cut through both items. There was no electrical wiring in that closet, no heat source, nothing that could explain how it happened. When I asked my sister about it later, she got this scared look on her face and told me to never touch her stuff again. She threw the board away the next day. When I was 12, I had the worst experience yet. It was a Saturday morning, and I was helping with chores, vacuuming the hallway while my mom cleaned the kitchen. As I was pushing the vacuum toward my parents' bedroom, I glanced up and saw what I thought was my mom standing in the doorway. I could only see part of her white nightgown and her bare foot against the carpet. I called out, asking if she wanted me to vacuum in there, but got no response. I turned off the vacuum and walked toward the door, but when I got there, no one was inside. Confused, I went to the kitchen, where I found my mom elbow deep in dishwater, wearing jeans and a t-shirt she'd been in all morning. "Were you just in your bedroom?" I asked her. She looked at me like I was crazy. "No, I've been here washing dishes for the past 20 minutes. I never told her what I saw. What was the point? She'd just tell me I was making it up for attention. As I got older, the activity in the house seemed to increase. Items would disappear only to reappear days later in strange places. We'd hear footsteps upstairs when everyone was downstairs. Doors would slam shut when there wasn't any breeze. My sister moved out the day she turned 18, and I don't blame her. She never talks about that house now. The worst of it, though, was the feeling of being watched all the time. In the shower while sleeping, doing homework, there was always this sensation of eyes on me. I developed severe insomnia because of it. I'd lie awake until exhaustion forced me to sleep, usually with my desk lamp on because the darkness felt too threatening. My dad's behavior got worse over the years, too. I don't know if the house affected him or if he was just an asshole to begin with, but the violence escalated. My mom ended up in the ER twice with accidents before she finally left him when I was 16. She moved in with her sister 2 towns over, and I stayed with my dad because someone had to, and I was terrified of what would happen to him alone in that house. For 3 years, it was just me and him and whatever else lived there with us. The goat man appeared more frequently. I'd see him in other mirrors around the house, not just the hallway one. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of him out of the corner of my eye, standing in doorways or at the bottom of the stairs. My dad never mentioned seeing anything unusual, but he started drinking more heavily and talking to himself when he thought I wasn't around. When I was 19, the bank foreclosed on the house. My dad had lost his job months earlier and had been hiding the notices from me. We had 30 days to get out. I was secretly relieved, but my dad was devastated. He disappeared the day before we had to leave, taking his truck and most of his clothes. He left a note saying he was going to stay with an old army buddy in Arizona. That was 11 years ago. I've spoken to him twice since then, brief, awkward phone calls where neither of us mentioned the house. The day after he left, I went back to gather the last of my stuff. I was alone in the house for the first time since everything started, and it felt like the walls were watching me. I worked quickly, shoving clothes and books into garbage bags, not bothering to be neat about it. I just wanted out. I was in my bedroom when I started whistling nervously, some random tune to fill the silence. Then I heard it, someone whistling the same tune back to me from somewhere else in the house. I froze, garbage bag clutched in my sweaty hands. The whistling continued, perfectly mimicking the melody I'd just been whistling. "Hello?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly high. "Dad? Is that you?" The whistling stopped. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then I heard heavy footsteps, much heavier than my dad's, walking slowly up the stairs from the basement. Thud, thud, thud. Deliberate, like whatever it was wanted me to hear its approach. I didn't wait around. I dropped the garbage bag and ran, not bothering to close the front door behind me. I drove straight to my mom's sister's place and didn't look back. I left most of my childhood possessions in that house, and I've never regretted it. I found out later from a former neighbor that the house has been sold 3 times since we left. No one stays more than a few months. It sits empty more often than not, with real estate signs appearing and disappearing like clockwork. The current owners rent it out, but tenants never seem to last through their lease. I drove by it last year just to see if it still affected me. It looked smaller than I remembered, the paint peeling, the yard overgrown. But as I slowed down in front of it, I felt that familiar knot in my stomach, that instinctual warning to stay away. And through the upstairs window, my old bedroom window, I swear I saw something move behind the curtain, something tall with a strangely shaped head. I still have nightmares about that house. In them, I'm always trapped in the hallway, staring at my reflection in that mirror as it slowly transforms into the goat man. He never speaks, just smiles that impossible smile. Sometimes I wake up with unexplained scratches on my arms or legs. My current roommate says I sleepwalk during these episodes, but I don't think that explains the marks. I've tried researching the house's history, looking for deaths or tragedies that might explain what we experienced, but there's nothing in the public record. I even contacted the family who lived there before us, but they seemed confused by my questions and insisted they'd had a perfectly pleasant 7 years in the home. So that's my story. I don't know what was in that house or why it seemed to fixate on me. I don't know if my parents' failing marriage attracted something negative or if whatever was there helped destroy their relationship. All I know is that for 13 years, I lived in a place that felt like it hated me, and part of me is still trapped there, staring into that hallway mirror, waiting for the goat man to appear again. Story 5. I've been trying to make sense of my earliest memory for most of my life. It's so vivid, so terrifying, that I sometimes wish I could just forget it completely. But I can't, and now I know why. I was just a little kid, probably around 2 years old. I remember the crib I slept in. It had these wooden rails painted white, and my mom had tied these little fabric bumpers around the sides. I had this blue blanket I was obsessed with, and a stuffed rabbit named Hoppy that I couldn't sleep without. That night started like any other. My parents put me to bed in my crib while my older brother slept in his twin bed across the room. I remember the nightlight glowing in the corner, one of those plug-in ones that cast a soft yellow light. Our bedroom was small, with wallpaper that had tiny blue trains on it. I don't remember falling asleep, but I definitely remember waking up. And what I saw when I opened my eyes is something that's been burned into my memory ever since. There was a figure hovering above my crib. Not floating exactly, more like leaning over the rail, but in a way that didn't seem physically possible. It was this old man, but not a real person. He looked like one of those puppets from the Muppet movies. You know, like those old men puppets that sit in the balcony and make snarky comments, except this wasn't funny at all. His face was wrinkled and saggy with these bushy eyebrows and deep-set eyes that were just staring at me. Not moving, just glaring down with this expression that wasn't angry exactly, but intense in a way that made my whole body freeze up. His mouth was set in this grimace, showing teeth that looked too big for his face. I remember his hands. They were gripping the rail of my crib, but they didn't look right. They were too big, the fingers too long and somehow stiff, like they weren't real hands at all. The worst part was the silence. He didn't make any noise, no breathing, no movement, just this unblinking stare. I didn't scream. I was too scared to make a sound. Instead, I just slowly pulled my blanket up over my head, trembling underneath it. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, too terrified to peek out. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. Finally, I gathered every bit of courage I had and lowered the blanket just enough to see if it was still there. It was gone. I looked around the room frantically. My brother appeared to be asleep in his bed. The door was closed. The nightlight was still on, but that thing was nowhere to be seen. I don't know what came over me, but I knew I had to get out of that room. I'd never climbed out of my crib before. My parents always had to lift me out, but somehow, in that moment, I figured it out. I remember the feeling of swinging my leg over the rail, how I sort of slid down the side until my feet hit the carpet. I immediately ran to the door, stretched up to reach the doorknob and yanked it open. I bolted down the hallway toward the living room where I could hear voices. My parents were sitting at the dining table with my grandmother, who was visiting from out of town. They had the Yahtzee game out. I remember the sound of dice hitting the table and my mom laughing about something right before I burst in. Everyone turned to look at me, standing there in my footy pajamas, probably white as a sheet. My dad seemed annoyed at first. "What are you doing out of bed?" But my mom must have seen something in my face because she immediately came over and scooped me up. I tried to explain what I'd seen, but I didn't have the vocabulary. I just kept saying something about the old man and watching me through tears and hiccups. My parents exchanged that look adults give each other when a kid is being irrational. My grandmother suggested I'd had a bad dream. My dad carried me back to bed, checked under it and in the closet to show there was nothing there, and tucked me back in with extra reassurance. I didn't sleep a wink the rest of that night. I just lay there, clutching Hoppy and staring at the spot where that puppet man had been. Over the years, I mostly convinced myself it had been a nightmare, a particularly vivid one, sure, but just a dream. My parents referenced it sometimes. "Remember when you were little and thought you saw that old man in your room?" They'd smile about it, like it was just a cute story about their imaginative kid. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up. That's where things stood until I was 18. I was home from my first semester at college, and my older brother was driving us both to the mall to do some last-minute Christmas shopping. We were catching up, talking about random stuff, when the conversation somehow turned to earliest memories. "Mine's kind of weird," I said, not thinking much of it. "I had this super vivid nightmare when I was like 2 or 3. There was this creepy old man puppet thing standing over my crib, just staring at me. It freaked me out so bad that I climbed out of my crib for the first time and ran to Mom and Dad. I wasn't even looking at my brother when I said it. I was messing with the radio trying to find a decent station. But when he didn't respond, I glanced over. He had gone completely pale. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tight that his knuckles were white. He actually pulled the car over to the shoulder of the road and put it in park. "What did you just say?" he asked, his voice different than I'd ever heard it. I laughed nervously. "Just that stupid nightmare I had when I was little. You know, the one Mom and Dad always tease me about." He turned to face me fully. "What did the old man look like?" Exactly. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Like a puppet. Like one of those cranky old men from the Muppets, with the wrinkled face and bushy eyebrows. Why, my brother looked like he was going to be sick. I saw it too, he whispered. I felt a chill run up my spine. What? That night, I was awake. I saw that thing leaning over your crib, staring at you. I was so scared I hid under my blanket. When I finally looked again, both you and that thing were gone. I heard you down the hall with Mom and Dad right after. We sat there in silence for what felt like forever, the cars whooshing past us on the highway. I felt like I couldn't breathe properly. Why didn't you ever say anything? I finally managed to ask. He shook his head slowly. I thought it was just a dream too. I convinced myself it had to be. And then, as time went on, I don't know. It seemed pointless to bring up, especially since you never mentioned it either. But we both saw the exact same thing, I said, the implications slowly dawning on me. The same, whatever it was, and we've never discussed it, not once in all these years. My brother started the car again, pulling back onto the road, but I could see his hands were shaking. I used to wake up sometimes for years after, thinking it was back, standing in the corner of our room, but it never was. We tried to rationalize it on the rest of the drive. Maybe we'd both seen the same puppet character on TV, and it had scared us. Maybe one of us had described our nightmare and somehow implanted the memory in the other. But none of that made sense. I'd never described the old man puppet in detail to anyone, and my brother had seen it the same night I had from across the room while I was still in my crib. We'd both seen it, and we'd both been too scared to ever talk about it until that day in the car. That was 5 years ago, and I still don't have any explanation. I've researched sleep paralysis, shared hallucinations, all sorts of psychological phenomena, but nothing quite fits. Sometimes I try to convince myself it doesn't matter anymore. It was so long ago, and nothing like it has happened since. But there are still nights when I wake up suddenly, heart racing, feeling like there's something watching me. I always check the corners of my room, just to be sure, and I never ever sleep with my back to an open room. My brother and I have a pact now. If either of us ever sees anything like that again, we tell each other immediately. No waiting 15 years this time. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't hidden under that blanket, or if I hadn't managed to climb out of that crib. Sometimes I think whatever that thing was, it was waiting for something, and sometimes in my darkest thoughts, I worry that maybe it's still waiting. All I know for certain is that something was in our bedroom that night, something that shouldn't have been there, something that two children independently saw and remembered in exactly the same way. And sometimes, when I visit my parents' house and walk past my old bedroom, I swear I can feel it in there, watching, waiting, remembering me just as clearly as I remember it. Story 6. I can't believe I'm finally typing this out. For 20 years, I've kept this bottled up inside me, only mentioning it to a handful of people who mostly just gave me that "this person is crazy" look. I guess I can't blame them. I wouldn't believe it either if someone else told me. But I need to get this off my chest, and maybe someone here has experienced something similar. I was 6 years old when it happened. It was summer break, and my parents had just repainted my bedroom this cool blue color I'd begged for. I remember being so excited to sleep in my new room that night. My mom had hung these glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, and I thought they were the coolest thing ever. I remember laying in bed that night, staring up at those plastic stars, feeling so grown up for some reason. I must have fallen asleep at some point, because I remember waking up suddenly. You know that feeling when you wake up and something just feels wrong, like your brain is trying to warn you that something isn't right? That's what I felt. At first, I thought maybe I heard a noise or something, but the house was completely silent. No TV sounds from my parents' room, no creaking floorboards, nothing. I remember checking my little Spider-Man digital clock on my nightstand. The red numbers said 2:14 a.m. I still remember those numbers so clearly, even after all these years. It's weird, the details that stick with you. I was about to roll over and go back to sleep when I noticed something in the corner of my room. At first, I thought it was just shadows playing tricks on me. You know how your mind can make ordinary things look scary in the dark? But as my eyes adjusted, I realized there was actually someone standing there. My first thought was that it was my mom checking on me. She used to do that sometimes if I had a bad dream, but as I focused more on the figure, I realized it wasn't my mom. It wasn't anyone I knew, yet somehow it was familiar. The figure was tall, adult-sized, and wearing what looked like a long white nightgown or dress. It was soaking wet. I don't mean like someone had splashed water on it. I mean soaking wet, like they had just been pulled from a lake or something. Water was actually dripping onto my carpet, making a small puddle. I remember being weirdly concerned about the carpet getting ruined. Such a stupid thing to worry about considering what was happening. The worst part was when I finally saw the face. I know this sounds absolutely insane, but it was my face. Not my 6-year-old face, but like an adult version of me. Same eyes, same nose, same features, just grown up. Long hair, dripping wet, sticking to the sides of the face and neck. But the smile, God, that smile. I don't even know how to describe it properly. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too knowing. Like this thing knew everything about me. Every thought I'd ever had, every fear, every secret. It was what I can only describe as insidious. That's the only word that fits. I couldn't move. I literally felt like I was paralyzed. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I wanted to scream for my parents, but no sound would come out. I was frozen, staring at this thing, and it was staring right back at me with that horrible smile. The worst part was that it didn't do anything. It just stood there staring at me, smiling that smile. For how long, I don't know. It felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Just standing there, water dripping, smiling. I remember thinking, if it takes one step toward me, I'll die. My heart will literally stop. I was that terrified, I actually started feeling lightheaded, like I was going to pass out from fear. Part of me hoped I would pass out, just so I wouldn't have to look at that smile anymore. Finally, and I still don't know how I managed this, I pulled my blanket over my head. It was this stupid childish instinct, like if I couldn't see it, it couldn't get me. I was shaking so badly that the bed frame was actually rattling. I was convinced that when I lowered the blanket, it would be standing right over me, still with that smile. I stayed under that blanket for what felt like forever, sweating, crying silently, praying harder than I'd ever prayed before or since. Eventually, I must have fallen asleep from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was streaming through my window and everything seemed normal. For a split second, I thought it had just been a nightmare. But then I saw the spot on my carpet, a dark, damp circle where the water had dripped. By the time my mom came in to wake me for breakfast, it had dried, but I could still see the outline where the carpet was slightly darker. I tried to tell my parents what happened, but they assumed it was just a bad dream. You just watched that scary movie with your cousin last weekend, remember? That's why you had a nightmare, my dad said. I knew it wasn't a nightmare, but what 6-year-old can convince adults that they saw a soaking wet adult version of themselves in their bedroom at 2 in the morning? For weeks afterward, I refused to sleep in my room. I'd make up excuses. It's too hot, I had a bad dream, my stomach hurts, anything to sleep on the couch or in my parents' room. Eventually, they got tired of it and made me go back to my own bed. I slept with the lights on for months. As I got older, I tried to make sense of what I saw that night. For a while, I wondered if it could have been my future self somehow visiting me. But if that was the case, why just stand there staring? Why have that horrible smile? It didn't feel like a friendly visit from my future self. It felt threatening. Later, when I learned more about spirits and demons, I went through a phase where I researched all that stuff, trying to find answers. I wondered if it could have been something demonic. I read that some entities can take forms that are familiar to you to gain your trust, but that didn't make sense either, because there was nothing trustworthy about what I saw. That smile was the opposite of trustworthy. Over the years, I've tried to rationalize it in various ways. Maybe it was sleep paralysis, though I've had sleep paralysis as an adult and it feels different. Maybe it was some weird hallucination brought on by the paint fumes in my freshly painted room. Maybe it was just an overactive imagination combined with the shadows in a dark room. But none of those explanations feel right. The water on the carpet was real. The fear I felt was real, more real than anything I've felt before or since. And that smile, I still see it sometimes in my dreams. The thing that freaks me out the most is that as I've gotten older, I've started to look more and more like what I saw that night. My face shape, the way my features have developed, it's getting closer to that adult version I saw. I'm 36 now, and sometimes when I catch my reflection unexpectedly, I get a flash of panic, thinking I'm seeing that thing again. I've kept my hair short my whole adult life, partly because I never want to look too much like what I saw. I still wake up sometimes at exactly 2:14 a.m., heart racing, feeling like someone's watching me. My partner thinks I just have anxiety, and maybe that's part of it. But I know it's connected to that night. It's like my body remembers, even when I'm trying to forget. Last week was the anniversary of that night, 20 years exactly, and I woke up at 2:14 a.m. drenched in sweat. I could have sworn I heard water dripping somewhere in our apartment, but when I got up to check, everything was dry. I couldn't fall back asleep, so I sat in the living room with all the lights on until dawn. I've never found an explanation that makes sense. I've talked to a few psychics over the years, desperate for answers, and got different theories from each one. A warning from a parallel universe, a spirit attached to the house, a time slip. Nothing feels right. So I'm putting this out here, hoping maybe someone else has experienced something similar. Have you ever seen a version of yourself that wasn't you? Has anyone else encountered an entity that mimicked their appearance but was clearly something else? I'm not looking for people to tell me I was just a kid with an overactive imagination. I know what I saw. That smile wasn't human, and neither was whatever was wearing my face. I still don't know what it wanted or why it came to me that night. Sometimes I wonder if it's still out there somewhere, waiting to return. Or worse, if it's somehow inside me now, waiting to emerge. All I know is that 20 years later, I still can't shake the memory of standing in the corner of my room, soaking wet, smiling that insidious smile at my terrified 6-year-old self. And I still check the corners of my bedroom every single night before I turn off the lights. Story 7 was about 3 weeks ago, middle of November, the kind of cold that gets under your skin and stays there. I was working the graveyard shift. Had been for years since my divorce. Easier to work when you can't sleep anyway. The call came in around 1:30 in the morning. Dispatch said a neighbor reported strange noises coming from the old Johnson place. You know, that Victorian house at the end of Maple Street that's been sitting empty since the family vanished in 2007. Everyone in Pine Hill knows that story. Parents with their 8-year-old daughter just gone one morning. Breakfast half eaten on the table. Car still in the garage, no signs of struggle, the kind of case that haunts a department for years. I remember thinking it was probably just teenagers looking for a spooky place to drink or mess around. We get calls about that house all the time. It's become this local legend, especially around Halloween. But it was the middle of November and something about that night felt different. Heavier somehow. The air was completely still, no moon, just darkness. I pulled up to the property around 1:45. No other cars visible, no obvious signs of entry from the front. I radioed in my position and let dispatch know I was going to check things out. Standard procedure. They acknowledged and said they'd check back in 20 minutes. The front door was unlocked. That was the first thing that felt off. The city had secured that place years ago. Boarded windows, padlocked doors. But the front door just opened when I turned the knob. No signs of forced entry, no broken lock. The smell hit me first, that distinctive musty scent of a house that's been sitting empty for years. But underneath it was something else, something sweet and powdery, like baby powder or those scented erasers kids use. I did a sweep of the first floor with my flashlight, calling out the standard Pine Hill Police. Anyone here? Nothing but dust and old furniture. That was the next weird thing. The furniture was all still there, arranged like the family might walk in any minute. Most abandoned houses get cleared out, but this one looked frozen in time. There was even mail on the side table by the door, yellow with age, a coffee cup on the kitchen counter with something dark and crusted inside. I was about to call it in as a false alarm when I heard it, a soft thud from upstairs like something being dropped on carpet. I called out again, louder this time. Nothing. I headed up the stairs, one hand on my holstered weapon, the other holding my flashlight. The stairs creaked under my weight. 15 years on the force, and I still get that tightness in my chest when entering an unknown situation alone. The upstairs hallway had 4 doors, all closed except one at the far end, which was slightly ajar. As I moved toward it, the temperature seemed to drop about 10 degrees. I blamed it on poor insulation, but man, it got cold fast. The door at the end of the hall opened to a child's bedroom. Pink walls, faded butterfly decals, a small bed with a dusty purple comforter. It was clearly Sarah Johnson's room, the missing 8-year-old. There were framed school photos on the dresser, a bookshelf full of those thin paperbacks kids read. And sitting perfectly centered on the bed was a small teddy bear, worn around the edges but otherwise looking like it had been placed there yesterday. I distinctly remember thinking how odd it was that the bear looked so clean compared to everything else in the room. No dust. I took a picture with my phone to document it, then turned to check the closet. When I turned back around, the bear was gone. I'm not talking about someone taking it, I'm saying it was there. I looked away for maybe 5 seconds, and when I looked back, it was just gone. I immediately did another sweep of the room, thinking maybe I'd knocked it off somehow. Nothing under the bed, nothing behind the dresser, just gone. That's when the rational part of my brain started coming up with explanations. I was tired, working too many doubles lately. Maybe there was never a bear there at all. Maybe my mind was just filling in what I expected to see in a little girl's room. While searching for the bear, I noticed something shiny poking out from under the edge of the bed. I crouched down and found a small silver locket, tarnished but still intact. Engraved on the back were the initials S.J., Sarah Johnson. I picked it up, and that's when everything went to hell. The temperature in the room plummeted. I could see my breath clouding in front of my face, and then I heard it, a giggle, a child's giggle. Not from the hallway or another room, but right there, like someone was standing right next to my ear. I spun around, drawing my weapon instinctively. "Police officer, show yourself!" Nothing but the empty room. I started backing toward the door, locket still in my left hand, gun in my right. The door slammed shut. Not like a draft caught it. It slammed, hard enough to shake the frame. I reached for the knob, and it was ice cold, so cold it burned my palm. When I tried to turn it, it wouldn't budge. Locked or jammed, I couldn't tell. I holstered my weapon and put my shoulder into the door, thinking it was just stuck from age or warped wood. It didn't move at all, felt like hitting a concrete wall. I tried again, harder this time. Nothing. Then the giggling started again, louder, coming from all around the room. The sound had this weird quality to it, like it was underwater or playing from an old record, and underneath it was another sound, almost like whispering, too quiet to make out words. I'd like to say I remained perfectly calm and professional, but that would be bullshit. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my radio to call for backup, but all I got was static, loud, screeching static that changed pitch when the giggling got louder. That's when I noticed the room didn't look right anymore. It's hard to explain. The corners didn't seem to meet at right angles. The ceiling appeared higher than before. The walls seemed to be breathing, subtle movements, expanding and contracting like lungs. I've never used drugs in my life, but my first thought was that I'd been drugged somehow. Maybe something airborne in the house, some kind of hallucinogen. I covered my mouth and nose with my sleeve and tried the door again, still immovable. Then I felt it, a small hand on my back, not aggressive, just there. Like a child trying to get my attention, I whirled around and my flashlight beam cut through empty air. The touch came again, this time on my arm. I spun again. Nothing. The giggling was constant now, and it had changed. There was something malicious in it, something enjoying my fear. I swept my flashlight around wildly, catching glimpses of something in the corners of my vision, a small shape darting just out of the light. When I'd turned to face it, nothing would be there. The locket in my hand was getting colder, so cold it felt like it was burning into my palm, but I couldn't seem to let go of it. My vision started to blur around the edges, like I was going to pass out. The room spun, and for a second, it changed completely. The faded pink walls became bright and new, the dusty furniture clean and polished. For just a moment, it looked like an active, lived-in child's room. Then I heard a door creak open. Not the one I'd come in through, but something else, something that sounded much heavier and older. The giggling changed again, becoming almost a shriek of delight. My flashlight beam caught something in the corner of the room, a dark, spreading stain on the floor that hadn't been there before. It looked wet, fresh. As I watched, it grew larger, spreading outward from the corner like spilled liquid. The whispering under the giggles became clearer. Stay with me, play with me, stay with me forever and ever and ever. I threw myself at the door again, using my full body weight. This time, it gave way so suddenly I tumbled into the hallway. I didn't waste time looking back. I ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time, nearly falling in my rush to get out. The front door was wide open now, the cold night air a blessed relief after the suffocating atmosphere inside. I ran straight to my patrol car, adrenaline pumping so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. That's when I realized I still had the locket clutched in my left hand. I tried to throw it away, but my fingers wouldn't release it. It was like it had become fused to my skin. The metal burned cold against my palm. I sat there, engine running, trying to catch my breath and think clearly. Protocol said I should call it in, get backup, document the scene. But what would I say? That I was attacked by a ghost? That a teddy bear disappeared and a room changed shape? They'd have me on psychiatric leave by morning. So I did something I've never done in 15 years of police work. I just left. Drove away with the engine roaring and didn't look back. I told dispatch there was nothing suspicious at the property, just an old house settling. I drove straight home, double-locked my door, and sat up all night with every light in my apartment on. Somewhere around dawn, I finally managed to open my hand. The locket fell onto my coffee table, looking like nothing more than an old piece of jewelry. I called in sick the next day, and the day after that. I couldn't bring myself to go back to work, to act normal. I keep hearing that giggle when my apartment gets quiet. Keep feeling something brush against my back when I turn around. Yesterday I drove past the Johnson house. My patrol car was parked outside. My actual car, Unit 346, with the dent in the passenger door from last year's fender bender. But I was driving my personal vehicle at the time, seeing this. I haven't told anyone at the department. Haven't told anyone at all until now. I think I'm losing my mind. Or maybe whatever was in that house followed me home. Sometimes at night, I see a small shadow moving along my bedroom wall, and the air fills with the smell of baby powder and dust. The locket is gone from where I left it, and this morning, I found a small teddy bear sitting on my kitchen counter. Story 8. I'm still trying to process what happened in my house last week. I've never been the type to believe in paranormal stuff. Ghost stories, hauntings, that was always entertainment to me, nothing more. But after what I saw, I don't know what to believe anymore. My family and I moved into this old farmhouse in Pinecrest, Idaho, about 3 months ago. It's quiet out here, the kind of quiet city people pay good money to experience for a weekend. We're surrounded by fields and forests, with our closest neighbor about half a mile down the road. It's peaceful, especially at night. Our 4-year-old son, Ethan, had been having trouble adjusting to the new place. Most nights he'd wake up crying, saying his room felt scary or that he heard noises. My wife Lisa and I chalked it up to normal kid stuff. New environment, unfamiliar sounds, that sort of thing. Sometimes he'd crawl into bed with us in the middle of the night, which we were trying to discourage, but you know how it is with kids. Last Tuesday night was when it happened. Ethan had come padding into our room around 11, clutching his stuffed dinosaur and whispering that he was scared. I was too tired to argue, so I just lifted the covers and let him climb in between Lisa and me. I remember being annoyed because I had an early meeting the next day and really needed sleep. I was on the left side of the bed facing the corner wall. Lisa was on the right side, closer to the bedroom door, and Ethan was snuggled between us. I must have fallen asleep pretty quickly. When I woke up, the room was dark, except for a sliver of light coming from the hallway. We always leave a nightlight on out there for Ethan. I felt him wiggling against my back, probably having a dream or something. I didn't move, just opened my eyes, figuring I'd try to fall back asleep. That's when I noticed the bedroom door was cracked open wider than usual. The nightlight was casting this dim, yellowish glow that barely reached into our room. As my eyes adjusted, I noticed something odd in the corner, maybe 4 or 5 feet from the bed. At first, I thought it was just a shadow from our dresser or something, but the longer I looked, the more I realized this shadow was wrong. It was darker than the other darkness in the room. That sounds stupid when I type it out, but I don't know how else to describe it. Like if regular darkness is black, this was something beyond black, and it wasn't just sitting there static like a normal shadow would be. It was shifting very subtly, like it was breathing. My first thought was that someone had broken in. We're isolated out here, and while crime is rare in Pinecrest, it happens. We keep a baseball bat under the bed for exactly this reason. I started to slowly move my hand under the covers, trying not to alert whoever was standing there that I was awake. But as I focused more on this shape, a chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the room temperature. This shadow wasn't just person-shaped, it was impossibly thin and tall, maybe 5 or 6 feet in height, but proportioned all wrong, and it didn't seem to be standing on the floor so much as it was just there, in the corner. Watching, I decided I needed to act quickly. If this was an intruder, I couldn't risk Ethan or Lisa getting hurt. I gripped the edge of the covers, took a deep breath, and suddenly sprang up from the bed, reaching for the bat. What happened next makes me question my sanity every time I think about it. The moment I moved, the figure changed. Not like it turned or ran, it literally transformed. The tall, slim shape instantly collapsed in on itself, like someone had suddenly deflated it. It shrank down into a perfect sphere about the size of a basketball. Then, and I swear this happened in less than a second, this ball of darkness moved rapidly along the floor, down the length of our bed, turned at a perfect right angle, and shot out the bedroom door faster than I could blink. I sat there frozen, bat in hand, staring at the empty doorway. There was no sound. No footsteps, no door opening, nothing hitting the walls as it fled, just complete silence. Whatever it was, it moved without making a single noise. I immediately checked on Lisa and Ethan. They were both still asleep, completely undisturbed. I flicked on the bedside lamp, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I checked under the bed, in the closet, behind the curtains, anywhere someone could hide. Nothing. I grabbed my phone and pulled up our security camera app. We have cameras at the front and back doors, plus one in the main living area downstairs. I scrolled through the footage from the past few hours. No one had entered or left the house. The doors were locked, the windows secured. Whatever I saw hadn't come from outside, or if it had, it hadn't used any normal means of entry. The thing that disturbs me the most about what I saw was how it absorbed light. It wasn't casting a shadow. It was a shadow, or rather, it was the absence of light itself, like a hole in reality that could move and change shape at will. I spent the rest of the night sitting up in bed, back against the headboard, bat across my lap. I told myself I must have been dreaming, that stress or exhaustion had caused some kind of waking nightmare. But I knew I was fully awake. I knew what I saw. When morning finally came, I was exhausted but relieved. Things always seem less frightening in daylight. Lisa noticed how tired I looked and asked if I was feeling okay. I wasn't sure whether to tell her. I didn't want to sound crazy or scare her unnecessarily. But as she was making coffee, she mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "I had the strangest experience last night," she said casually. "I got up around 1 to use the bathroom, and when I was walking back, I swear I saw someone standing in the office across from our bedroom, just for a second, in my peripheral vision. When I looked directly, there was nothing there. My eyes must have been playing tricks on me. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. I asked her what time this was, and she said she remembered checking her phone when she got back to bed. It was 1:17 in the morning. That would have been about an hour before my experience. I finally told her what I'd seen. I could tell she was trying to be supportive, but I could see the concern in her eyes, the kind you give someone who might be losing it a little. She suggested maybe I'd had a hypnagogic hallucination, something that happens between sleep and wakefulness. I nodded and agreed that must be it, but I knew better. The next night, I barely slept. I kept the lights on in our room and positioned myself so I could see the entire space. Nothing happened. Same with the night after that. Part of me was relieved, but another part was more disturbed, because if nothing happened again, did that mean I really had imagined it all? But I know what I saw. I watched a humanoid figure literally transform and flee our bedroom. I watched it absorb light rather than block it. I watched it move in ways that defy physics. I've spent hours researching online, trying to find anyone who's had a similar experience. I've found plenty of ghost stories and shadow people accounts, but nothing quite matches what I witnessed. The transformation is what gets me. I've never heard of anything like that. We've been living in the house for almost 3 months now, and I'd never noticed anything strange before that night. The previous owners were an elderly couple who moved to Arizona to be closer to their grandkids. Nothing in the house's history suggests anything unusual happened here. Ethan still comes to our room sometimes, saying he's scared. When I ask him what he's afraid of, he just says, "the dark parts." Kids say weird stuff all the time, but now those words make my skin crawl. I've started leaving lights on throughout the house at night. I've put additional night lights in every room. I tell Lisa it's for Ethan's benefit, but really, it's for me. I can't shake the feeling that whatever I saw that night is still here, hiding in the darkest corners of our home, watching us. The rational part of my brain keeps trying to come up with explanations. Maybe it was a burglar who somehow got past our security. Maybe it was a weird reflection or shadow caused by headlights from a passing car. Maybe I was half asleep and my mind filled in the gaps with something impossible. But I know what I saw, and the worst part is not knowing what it wanted. Was it just observing us? Was it there for Ethan, for Lisa, for me? And will it come back? I'm writing this because I need to tell someone who won't immediately think I'm having some kind of breakdown. I'm not a superstitious person. I don't scare easily. But I can't explain what happened that night, and I can't stop thinking about it. If anyone has experienced something similar or has any idea what this could have been, please let me know. Until then, I'll be sleeping with the lights on and a baseball bat within reach. Story 9. I've been a cop in Clearwater for almost 10 years now. Nothing special about our town, just your typical small community where everyone knows everyone's business, and there's usually nothing more exciting than the occasional drunk driver or domestic dispute. That all changed 3 weeks ago, and I'm still trying to make sense of what happened. It was a Tuesday night, around 2 in the morning, the kind of dead shift where you're fighting to stay awake, drinking gas station coffee that tastes like it was brewed in a sock. I was parked behind the old pharmacy, half dozing and listening to the police scanner when the call came in. Unit 4, we've got a report of a suspicious vehicle at Fairview Industrial Park. Caller says they saw headlights heading in, but nobody should be there this time of night. I perked up immediately. Fairview has been abandoned for at least 5 years now. The manufacturing plant closed down, and the whole complex has been sitting there rotting ever since. Kids sometimes break in to drink or spray paint the walls, but nobody has any legitimate reason to be there at 2 in the morning. Copy that. En route, I responded, already starting my cruiser. The industrial park is on the outskirts of town, maybe a 15-minute drive from where I was. The whole way there, I had this weird feeling in my gut, not exactly dread, but something uncomfortable. I chalked it up to the late hour and too much caffeine. When I pulled up to the main gate, I noticed it was still chained and locked, which was odd. I got out and shined my flashlight around the perimeter, finding tire tracks where someone had driven through the grass to bypass the gate entirely. I radioed in my position and followed the same path in my cruiser. The place was eerie as hell at night. Broken windows, rusted metal, and graffiti everywhere. The moonlight cast strange shadows across the crumbling buildings, and the whole complex was dead silent except for the occasional creaking of metal in the wind. Then I spotted it, a sedan parked haphazardly outside the old administration building. No lights, no movement. I ran the plates through the system, but nothing came back. Either the database was being slow or the plates were fake. I approached carefully, hand on my holstered weapon. The car was empty, but still warm to the touch. Someone had arrived recently. As I was examining the vehicle, I noticed something from the corner of my eye. A faint flickering light coming from inside the main building. Someone was inside with what looked like a flashlight or lantern. Following protocol, I should have waited for backup, but there was only one other officer on duty that night, and he was clear on the other side of town dealing with a bar fight. Besides, it was probably just some teenagers or maybe a homeless person seeking shelter. I'd dealt with those situations 100 times before. I entered through what used to be the main doors, now hanging off their hinges. The smell hit me first. Mildew, dust, and something else I couldn't identify. Something almost metallic and sweet. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating years of neglect and decay. Water damage had caused parts of the ceiling to collapse, and trash was scattered everywhere. "Police! Anyone here?" I called out, my voice echoing through the empty lobby. No response. I followed the corridor toward where I thought I'd seen the light. My footsteps sounded unnaturally loud on the tile floor. As I moved deeper into the building, the temperature seemed to drop several degrees. I remember thinking that was strange since it was the middle of August and still warm outside. The hallway led to a series of offices, most with their doors missing or hanging open. I checked each one methodically, finding nothing but old furniture and water-damaged paperwork. Then I heard it, so faint I almost missed it. "Help me." It was barely a whisper, coming from an office at the end of the hallway. My training kicked in, and I approached cautiously, announcing myself again. "This is Officer Thompson. I'm here to help. Where are you?" No answer, but the light I'd seen earlier was flickering from under the door of the last office. I pushed it open slowly, my flashlight illuminating an empty room. Just a desk, a fallen chair, and papers scattered across the floor. But the light I'd been following wasn't there. "Hello?" I called out, confused now. I was certain I'd seen light coming from this room. As I swept my flashlight around, I caught something, just for a split second. A shadow moving quickly out of view, not cast on the wall, but a three-dimensional shadow like a person ducking behind the desk. But when I moved to check, there was nothing there. No place anyone could hide. My radio suddenly crackled to life, making me jump. "Unit 4, be advised we have a report of someone in your vehicle." "Repeat, someone has been spotted in your police cruiser." My blood ran cold. I'd locked my car. I always do, and I had the keys in my pocket. "Copy that." "Heading back now," I replied, already moving quickly toward the exit. As I jogged back through the building, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. Every doorway, every shadow seemed to hide something just out of sight, and it was getting colder with each step. I burst out of the building, half expecting to see someone trying to steal my cruiser. What I saw instead was worse. There was someone sitting in the driver's seat. Even in the dim light, I could make out what looked like a police uniform. Drawing my weapon, I approached carefully. "Police officer, step out of the vehicle with your hands up." No movement, no response. I got closer, close enough to see that the figure wasn't moving at all, just sitting there, staring straight ahead through the windshield. I reached for the door handle, my heart pounding in my ears. I yanked the door open, ready to confront whoever was inside, but the seat was empty, completely empty. Yet somehow the headlights were on, and I know for a fact they weren't on when I'd left the vehicle. I checked the entire car, back seat, passenger seat, even under the car. Nothing, but the headlights were definitely on, and I hadn't left them that way. My hands were shaking as I got back in the cruiser and radioed dispatch. Dispatch, this is Unit 4. There's no one in my vehicle. Repeat, vehicle is secure. Who reported seeing someone in my car? The radio crackled, and through the static I heard it again, that same desperate whisper. Help me. It wasn't coming from dispatch. It was coming through my radio, but it wasn't the dispatcher's voice. I looked up into my rearview mirror and felt my heart stop. There was someone in my back seat, a face, pale, gaunt, with hollow eyes that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. Our eyes met in the mirror, and I swear I felt the temperature in the car drop 20 degrees in an instant. I spun around, drawing my weapon again, but the back seat was empty, completely empty, just like before. My breath was coming in short gasps now, visible in the suddenly freezing air of the car. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. Then I heard a loud bang from the trunk, a single deliberate thud, like someone punching the inside of the trunk. Logic told me to drive away, to get the hell out of there, but training and stubborn curiosity pushed me to investigate. I got out, weapon drawn, and moved to the back of the car. "If someone's in there, make yourself known," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. Another bang, louder this time. With my gun in one hand, I used the other to insert the key and pop the trunk. It swung open to reveal nothing, just the standard equipment. First aid kit, flares, my duffel bag with a change of clothes. Nothing that could have made that noise. I slammed the trunk shut, genuinely frightened now. As I moved back toward the driver's door, I heard the whisper again. This time it wasn't coming from the radio or from inside the car. It was right beside my ear, so close I could feel the cold breath. "Help me, please." I spun around, but there was nobody there, just the empty parking lot and the abandoned building looming in the darkness. I got back in the car with shaking hands and called for backup. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I needed another human being there. "Dispatch, I need immediate assistance at Fairview Industrial Park. Possible intruder." I couldn't bring myself to say what was really happening. They'd think I was losing my mind. "Copy that. Unit 4, Unit 2 is responding. ETA 15 minutes. 15 minutes. I had to sit there for 15 minutes with whatever this was. I kept the car running, lights on, scanning the area constantly. The whispers continued, sometimes from the radio, sometimes from outside the car, sometimes seemingly inside my own head. Always the same desperate plea for help. Several times I caught glimpses of movement in my peripheral vision. A figure walking between buildings, a face in the rearview mirror, a hand pressing against the passenger window. But each time I turned to look directly, there was nothing there. When my backup finally arrived, I was sitting rigid in my seat, covered in cold sweat. Officer Davis approached my window, looking confused. "Thompson, you okay? What's going on?" I opened my mouth to explain, but how could I? How could I tell him I'd been seeing ghosts or having hallucinations or whatever the hell this was? "I thought I saw someone breaking into the building," I said instead. "Let's check it out." We searched the entire complex together. Every building, every room. We found nothing. No signs of anyone being there besides the tire tracks I'd followed in. Even the sedan that had been parked out front was gone, though neither of us had heard it leave. As we walked back to our cruisers, Davis clapped me on the shoulder. "Probably just some kids who bolted when they saw you coming. You look like hell, though. Maybe you should call it a night." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As Davis drove away, I sat in my cruiser for a long moment. The whispers had stopped. The presence, whatever it had been, seemed to have retreated when Davis arrived. I told myself it was over, that I'd just been overtired, that my mind had played tricks on me in the creepy abandoned building. I started the drive back to the station to file my report. About halfway there, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Those eyes were staring back at me again. I nearly drove off the road, jerking the wheel hard and then correcting. When I looked again, the back seat was empty, but I could feel it. Whatever it was, it had followed me. It was in the car with me. I finished my shift somehow, filed a report that mentioned nothing about whispers or apparitions, and drove home as the sun was coming up. I convinced myself that once I was home, once I was out of the uniform and away from that place, it would be over. It's been 3 weeks. I still hear the whispers sometimes, at night when the house is quiet, in the car when I'm alone, that desperate pleading voice asking for help. I still catch glimpses of that face in reflective surfaces, still feel the temperature drop unexpectedly. I don't know what I encountered that night at Fairview. I don't know what followed me home, but I know it's still here, and I know it wants something from me, something I don't know how to give. Story 10. I've been debating whether to share this for months now. Part of me wants to forget it ever happened, but another part needs to know if anyone else has experienced something similar. I'm not normally someone who believes in the supernatural or gets spooked easily, but what happened that night on Highway 57 last summer has fundamentally changed me. For context, I've always avoided Highway 57 at night. Even as a teenager, when my friends would take that route as a shortcut to get to parties in the next county over, I'd make excuses or offer to drive so we could take the longer, well-lit interstate instead. I couldn't explain why, just that the narrow, winding road cutting through miles of dense forest and marshy swampland gave me the creeps. My friends teased me about it, but I didn't care. Something about that road just felt wrong. My job as a sales rep requires a lot of driving, and I'm usually good about planning my routes to avoid Highway 57 after dark. But 3 months ago, I was returning from a conference in Millbrook that ran late. I was exhausted. It was already 11:30 at night, and I just wanted to get home. Using Highway 57 would cut almost 40 minutes off my drive. I remember sitting in my car in the hotel parking lot, staring at the map on my phone and thinking, "Don't be ridiculous, Jason. It's just a road." So I did it. I took Highway 57. That decision will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a muggy summer night, the kind where the air feels thick and heavy. Even with my car's AC cranked to max, I felt uncomfortable, my shirt sticking to my back. The moon was nearly full that night, but thick clouds kept obscuring it, creating this weird effect where the landscape would brighten and then dim every few minutes. I merged onto Highway 57 just after midnight. The road was completely deserted. No headlights in front of me, nothing in my rear-view mirror, just me, the asphalt, and walls of pine trees on both sides. The radio kept cutting in and out between stations, so eventually I just turned it off. The silence made me more aware of how alone I was out there. After about 20 minutes of driving, I started feeling drowsy. The white lines on the road seemed to be hypnotizing me, and I could feel my eyelids getting heavy. I rolled down my window, hoping the night air would help keep me alert. That's when I saw him for the first time. There was a man standing just beyond the tree line to my right, tall, unnaturally tall, at least 6.5 feet, wearing what looked like dark clothing. He wasn't moving, just standing there, facing the road, facing me. I couldn't make out his features clearly in the darkness, but I could feel that he was watching my car pass by. He didn't wave or signal for help like someone whose car had broken down might do. He just stared. I remember thinking it was weird but not necessarily alarming. Maybe he was a hunter, though it wasn't hunting season. Maybe he was just some guy taking a leak in the woods. I accelerated a bit, eager to put some distance between us. About 5 minutes later, and this is where things started to get truly unnerving, I saw him again. This time he was standing right at the edge of the asphalt, just inches from the white line marking the shoulder. Same height, same dark clothes, same stillness, but this was impossible. I'd been driving at a steady 60 miles per hour without stopping. There were no side roads or paths that would have allowed him to get ahead of me. There was no way it could be the same person, but somehow I knew it was. As I drove past him, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The man was now standing directly in the middle of the road behind my car, facing my direction. My stomach dropped. This wasn't right. This wasn't possible. I pressed the gas pedal harder, watching my speedometer climb to 70, then 80. My rational brain was trying to come up with explanations. Maybe it was different people who happened to look similar. Maybe I was more tired than I thought and my mind was playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew something was terribly wrong. The highway curved ahead, and after rounding a bend, I spotted hazard lights blinking about a quarter-mile ahead. As I got closer, I could see it was a sedan pulled onto the shoulder, its hood up. A woman with long dark hair was standing beside it, frantically waving her arms to flag down help. I'm ashamed to admit my first instinct was to keep driving. After what I'd just seen, stopping seemed dangerous. But I couldn't just leave someone stranded on this road, especially at this hour. So I slowed down, preparing to pull over behind her car. That's when I saw him again. The man was standing about 10 feet behind the woman, half in shadow. She kept waving at me, seemingly oblivious to his presence. I'll never forget the ice-cold terror that washed over me in that moment. I hit the gas again and sped past her, watching in my side mirror as both figures grew smaller in the distance. To this day, I don't know if that woman was real or part of whatever nightmare I'd stumbled into. I hope she was just an illusion, because the alternative, that I left her there with that thing, is too horrible to contemplate. By this point, I was in full-blown panic mode. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt, sweat was pouring down my face, and I could barely keep the car straight as I pushed it to 90 miles per hour. The highway seemed endless, stretching on and on through the dark forest. I kept checking my mirrors obsessively, terrified I'd see that figure again, somehow keeping pace with my car. After what felt like an eternity, I spotted the glowing sign of a gas station up ahead. I nearly cried with relief. I pulled in so fast I almost hit the pumps, screeched to a halt, and just sat there for a minute, trying to get my breathing under control. The station was one of those old-fashioned places with just 2 pumps and a small convenience store. The fluorescent lights inside seemed impossibly bright after the darkness of the highway. I got out on shaky legs and went in, partly to ask for directions to get off Highway 57 as soon as possible, but mostly because I needed to be around another human being. The clerk was an older man with a weathered face and a gray mustache. He barely looked up from his crossword puzzle when I walked in. I bought a coffee I didn't want just to have an excuse to talk to him. "Is there another way to get to Lakeside from here besides staying on 57? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He squinted at me. "What's wrong with 57? I hesitated, not sure how much to say. I think I saw someone strange on the road back there." The clerk's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Highway's full of strange folks," he said, then went back to his puzzle without elaborating. That response chilled me almost as much as what I'd seen. It was like he knew exactly what I was talking about, but didn't want to acknowledge it directly. I wanted to press him for more information, but something told me he wouldn't, or couldn't, say more. He did give me directions to a turnoff about 10 miles ahead that would eventually connect to the interstate. I thanked him and left, the little bell above the door jingling cheerfully in contrast to the dread that had settled in my stomach. Back in my car, I sat for a moment with the engine idling, gathering my courage to get back on the road. The gas station's bright lights created a bubble of safety that I was reluctant to leave. But I couldn't stay there forever, and home was still an hour away. I pulled back onto Highway 57, keeping my speed right at the limit, hyper alert for any sign of the figure. For about 5 miles, everything seemed normal, just an empty road at night. I started to wonder if maybe I had been hallucinating from exhaustion. Then I saw him again. This time he was standing directly in the middle of my lane, facing me. I had maybe 2 seconds to react. Swerving seemed dangerous. The road was flanked by ditches on both sides, so I did something that still horrifies me to think about. I accelerated straight toward him. In the split second before impact, As my headlights fully illuminated him, I finally saw his face clearly. What I saw wasn't human. His eyes were like black holes, not just dark, but empty, as if they led to somewhere else. And his mouth, it stretched into a smile that was far too wide for any human face, revealing rows of small pointed teeth. I closed my eyes instinctively, bracing for impact. There was no thud, no crash. When I opened them again, the road ahead was empty. But in my rearview mirror, I could see him standing in the middle of the road, that impossible smile still on his face, growing smaller as I put distance between us. I don't remember much about the rest of the drive home. I know I took the turn off the gas station Clark had mentioned and eventually found my way to the interstate. I know I didn't stop again until I was in my driveway, my hands cramping from gripping the steering wheel for so long. I haven't driven Highway 57 since that night. I've taken sick days when work would require that route. I've made up excuses to avoid family gatherings that would mean traveling that road. I've tried researching the history of Highway 57, looking for accidents or strange occurrences, but haven't found anything conclusive. Sometimes I wonder if what I experienced was some kind of shared hallucination or local legend come to life. The Clark's reaction makes me think I'm not the first to encounter whatever is out there, but mostly I lie awake at night wondering about that woman with the broken down car and if she ever made it home. Story 11. I've been sitting on this story for months because I honestly don't know what to make of it. I'm not the type to believe in ghosts or paranormal stuff, but what happened in our apartment last February has me questioning everything I thought I knew about reality. For context, I'm 26, and my boyfriend Jack and I have been living together in our top-floor apartment in Westbrook for about 2 years now. We have 2 dogs, a golden retriever mix named Luna and a terrier named Milo. They sleep in our room and are pretty alert to any unusual sounds or movements. We've never had any major issues with the apartment before, just the usual stuff like noisy pipes and drafty windows. It started on a Tuesday night. Nothing special about that day. I remember working from home, cooking dinner, watching some Netflix with Jack, and then getting ready for bed around 11. Jack fell asleep almost immediately, he always does, but I was having trouble drifting off. I was scrolling through my phone when I suddenly got this overwhelming feeling that someone was watching me from our bathroom doorway, which was slightly ajar. This wasn't just a random thought or a shadow playing tricks. It was this intense, heavy sensation that made the hair on my neck stand up. I froze, phone still in hand, and just stared at the dark gap of the bathroom door. I couldn't see anything, but the feeling was so strong that I was mentally preparing myself for something to touch me. I remember pulling the covers up higher and holding my breath, trying not to wake Jack. The dogs were both asleep at the foot of our bed, which was weird because normally they'd react if something was off. After what felt like forever but was probably only a couple of minutes, the feeling subsided. I eventually fell asleep, telling myself it was just my imagination or anxiety or something. The next morning I completely forgot about it. It was Wednesday, and I had an early gym session before work. Jack was still asleep when I left, and when I got home around 8, he had already gone to work. I was rushing to get ready for my 9 o'clock Zoom meeting when I noticed something odd on our bathroom counter, an open tube of Aquaphor balm. At the time, I just thought, that's weird, and closed it. Neither Jack nor I had used it recently. I figured maybe one of us had knocked it over while reaching for something else. I didn't think much about it and went about my day. That evening is when things got truly bizarre. I went to the bathroom around 10 to take out my contact lenses before bed. I opened my contact case like I always do, and what I saw made my stomach drop. The left side of my contact case had the lid closed, but when I opened it, it was filled about 3/4 of the way with thick Aquaphor balm. The right side contained contact solution with my old contact lens floating in it, just as it should be. I stood there, staring at my contact case, my brain struggling to process what I was seeing. That's when the memory of the watching presence from the night before came flooding back, along with the open Aquaphor tube I'd found that morning. "Jack?" I called out, my voice shakier than I expected. "Did you put something in my contact case?" He came into the bathroom looking confused. When I showed him, he was as baffled as I was. "Why would I do that?" he asked. "That doesn't even make sense." We started going through possible explanations. Maybe I did it myself in a half-asleep state, but I've never sleepwalked in my life. Neither has Jack. And we would have to be pretty coordinated to open a contact case, squeeze Aquaphor into just one side, and then close it again, all while asleep. Could someone have broken in? That made even less sense. We live on the top floor, all our doors were locked, and our windows have security features. Plus, the dogs would have gone ballistic if a stranger entered our apartment. And who breaks in just to mess with someone's contact case? I emptied the Aquaphor, cleaned my case thoroughly, and put in fresh solution and my contact. But I couldn't shake the unsettled feeling that had settled in my chest. That night, I had trouble falling asleep again. Jack tried to reassure me that there must be a logical explanation, but I could tell he was unsettled too. He suggested maybe I did it myself, absent-mindedly, while getting ready in the morning, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would I put thick balm in my contact case? As I lay there trying to sleep, I remembered 2 other strange incidents that had happened in our apartment over the past year. The first one was about 8 months ago. I was alone because Jack was on a business trip. I woke up at exactly 3:15 in the morning to the sound of 2 distinct knocks on our bedroom wall. Not the wall shared with the hallway, but the exterior wall that faces nothing but air since we're on the top floor. The knocks were clear and deliberate, like someone using their knuckles to knock on a door. The dogs both woke up and stared at the wall, their ears perked up. I was terrified, but eventually convinced myself it was just the building settling or something from outside. The second incident happened about 3 months later. Jack and I were both asleep when the same thing happened. 2 clear knocks on the same wall at around 2:45 in the morning. This time, Jack heard it too. We both sat up in bed, looked at each other, and Jack even got up to check the apartment, but everything was normal. We discussed it the next morning and decided it must have been something to do with the building's structure or maybe neighbors moving furniture, though how that would create knocks on an exterior wall, I don't know. After the contact case incident, these memories took on a more ominous feel. They no longer seemed like random, easily explained occurrences. They felt connected somehow. The next day, I did some research online about similar experiences. I found stories about sleep paralysis, hypnagogic hallucinations, and even carbon monoxide poisoning causing strange perceptions. But none of these explanations quite fit. I wasn't paralyzed during the watching sensation, and carbon monoxide poisoning would affect both of us and our dogs, not just manifest as a single bizarre event. I also looked into sleepwalking. Could I or Jack have developed it suddenly in our mid-20s with no prior history? It seems unlikely, but I guess it's not impossible. Still, the specificity of the Aquaphor in just one side of my contact case is what really gets me. It feels deliberate, like someone was trying to send a message or play a prank. We considered setting up a camera in our bedroom to see if one of us was sleepwalking, but honestly, the idea of potentially capturing something else on camera freaked me out even more. What if the camera showed neither of us getting up, but the Aquaphor moving on its own? I don't think I could handle seeing that. It's been about 4 months since that night, and nothing similar has happened since. No more watching sensations, no mysterious Aquaphor appearances, no knocks on the wall, but I still think about it almost every day. Sometimes I'll be doing something completely normal like cooking dinner or watching TV, and suddenly I'll remember the feeling of being watched from the bathroom doorway, and my skin will crawl all over again. Jack thinks we should just let it go. He says dwelling on it isn't healthy, and he's probably right. But I can't shake the feeling that whatever happened that night wasn't normal. It wasn't just a weird coincidence or my imagination playing tricks. The thing that bothers me the most is that I'll probably never know what really happened. Was it something supernatural? A glitch in reality? Did one of us do it while sleepwalking? Or is there some perfectly logical explanation that I just haven't thought of yet? I've considered talking to a therapist about it, not because I think I'm going crazy, but just to have someone else's perspective. But I'm afraid they'll just dismiss it as anxiety or suggest I was half asleep and did it myself without remembering. We still live in the same apartment, though I've thought about suggesting we move. But that feels like running away from something, and who's to say it wouldn't follow us? Besides, aside from these 3 incidents, we love our place. It gets great light, the location is perfect for our commutes, and the rent is reasonable for the area. So for now, I'm just trying to live with the uncertainty. I double-check that the Aquaphor tube is closed every night. I make sure my contact case is empty before I put my lenses in each morning, and sometimes, when I'm alone in the apartment and feel like something is watching me, I talk out loud and say, "I don't know who or what you are, but please leave my contact case alone." Maybe that sounds crazy, but it makes me feel better. Jack laughs when I do it, but I catch him glancing at the bathroom doorway sometimes when he thinks I'm not looking. I don't expect to ever understand what happened that night. Maybe it was nothing, maybe it was something. All I know is that it shook my understanding of reality in a way I never expected, and I'm still trying to make peace with that. Has anyone else experienced something like this? Something small but inexplicable that makes you question everything? I'd love to know I'm not alone in this. Story 12. I've never really told this story in full before. Not to anyone outside my family anyway. When you live with something your whole life, you start to normalize it, even when you know deep down it's anything but normal. I guess I'm sharing this now because I finally need to make sense of it all. I was born in a small 2-bedroom house in rural Tennessee. Nothing special about it, just your typical starter home with faded blue siding and a porch that creaked when you walked on it. My earliest memories there are both ordinary and not so ordinary. I remember playing with toys in the living room, my mom making dinner, my dad coming home from work. But I also remember the girl. I was maybe 4 or 5 when I first saw her. I was lying in bed, trying to fall asleep, when I heard a scratching sound. Not like a mouse in the walls or anything, more like fingernails dragging across the wooden floor. I rolled over and peeked under the bed, and there she was. A girl about my age with long dark hair covering most of her face, crawling out from under my bed like she'd been hiding there all along. I screamed, of course. My parents came running, but by then there was nothing to see. "Just a nightmare," my dad said, tucking me back in. But it wasn't. I saw her regularly after that, maybe once every couple of months, always crawling out from under the bed, never saying anything, just staring at me with these hollow eyes before disappearing when I screamed or turned on the light. Then there was the old man. I first saw him when I was about 7. I woke up one night to use the bathroom and saw him standing at the bottom of the stairs. He wore faded overalls and had this weathered face, like leather that had been left out in the sun too long. When he noticed me watching, he slowly raised his finger to his lips, "Shh," and started creeping up the stairs. I ran back to my room and dove under the covers. I didn't come out until morning. My parents never believed me about either of them. I don't blame them. What would you think if your kid kept talking about people in the house that nobody else could see? But then things started happening that they couldn't explain away so easily. When I was about 9, our phone rang late one night. My mom answered it, and I remember the confused look on her face. "Mom, is that you? I can barely hear you." She pressed the phone harder against her ear. "Mom? Hello?" She hung up and immediately called my grandmother back. "Did you just call us?" she asked. My grandmother hadn't. The caller ID had shown her number, but she was sound asleep and hadn't touched the phone. This happened a few more times over the years, always late at night, always my grandmother's number, always just static and white noise on the other end. The scratches were what finally made my parents take it seriously. It started when they first discussed moving when I was about 13. My dad had gotten a job offer in another state, and they were sitting at the kitchen table talking about whether we should go. I was in my room, but I could hear them. That night, my dad woke up with 3 long scratches down his back, like someone had dragged their fingernails across his skin while he slept. My mom thought maybe he'd scratched himself, but the next night she got them too, on her arm. Then I found them on my leg. Even my little sister, who was just 4 at the time, had a scratch across her cheek one morning. None of us remembered getting them. They weren't deep, but they stung like hell. Dad took the job and we moved when I was 14. I thought maybe we'd leave the weirdness behind, but I was wrong. So wrong. Our new house was bigger, newer. It had this long hallway that connected all the bedrooms, with a bathroom at the end. I started waking up at exactly 3 a.m. every night to someone shouting my name, not whispering, not calling, shouting, like they were angry at me. I'd jerk awake, heart pounding, but there was never anyone there. My new bedroom had a walk-in closet with sliding doors. I started keeping them closed at night because I'd see shadows moving inside, shifting and stretching like someone pacing back and forth. One night I was so sure someone was in there that I convinced my dad to check. He found nothing, of course, but the next morning, the doors were wide open again. The dreams started in that house too. I'd dream about this heavy-set man in an old-fashioned suit. He never had a face, just smooth skin where his features should be. He told me his name was Mark, and he knew things about my family that I'd never heard before. He'd tell me about arguments my parents had before I was born, about a car accident my mom had when she was pregnant with me, about my grandfather's gambling problem that nobody ever talked about. When I'd mention these things to my parents, they'd get this look, part shock, part fear. "How do you know about that?" my mom asked once after I mentioned something about her sister who died before I was born. I told her about Mark, and she just got up and left the room. I heard her crying in the bathroom later. We only stayed in that house for about 2 years before moving again. This time it was because my dad got laid off and we had to downsize. The new place was smaller, older, with this weird layout where you had to walk through my parents' bedroom to get to the bathroom. I hated it, but the shadows followed us. Not just shadows, actual shadow figures, dark, human-shaped outlines that would stand in corners or doorways watching. Sometimes they'd move from room to room, always just at the edge of my vision. If I turned to look directly at them, they'd be gone, but I could feel them still there, watching. My little sister started having nightmares around this time. She'd wake up screaming about the lady at the door. When I asked her about it in the morning, she said there was a lady who stood in her doorway at night just watching her sleep. The description made my blood run cold because I'd seen the same thing, a woman's outline, just darker than the darkness around it, standing in the doorway to my sister's room. I hadn't told anyone about it because I didn't want to scare her. One night, I overheard my parents talking about it. "She's describing Mom," my mother whispered to my father. "The way she stands, the way she tilts her head. That's exactly how my mother used to check on us at night. My grandmother had died when I was 11. You think it's her?" my dad asked, sounding skeptical but not dismissive. "I've seen her too," my mom admitted. "I thought maybe I was just, I don't know, missing her or something, but if both girls are seeing her..." We moved again when I was 18. My parents tried to make it seem like it was just because I was going to college and they wanted to be closer, but I knew better. The shadows had gotten worse. The scratches had come back. This time whenever we argued or when someone got upset, like whatever was with us fed on conflict. The new place was an apartment, temporary, while they looked for something more permanent. It was only there on weekends and holidays since I lived in a dorm now. But even in those brief visits, it didn't take long for the familiar pattern to establish itself. The shadows, the voices, Mark in my dreams, telling me things I shouldn't know. One weekend when I came home, my older brother was visiting too. He'd moved out years ago and rarely came back. We were sitting in the kitchen late one night just talking when I mentioned Mark and the dreams. "Wait, what did you say this guy's name was?" my brother asked, suddenly alert. "Mark, at least that's what he calls himself in the dreams. Heavy-set guy, always wears a suit. No face though." My brother pulled out his phone and scrolled through some photos before holding it up. "Is this him? I mean, ignore the face, but is this the same build, same style?" It was a picture of a man in a suit, standing next to what looked like a much younger version of my dad. The man was heavy-set, just like in my dreams, with the same rounded shoulders and thick neck. Yeah, that's exactly what he looks like. Who is he? My brother looked at me for a long moment, then at the doorway to make sure our parents weren't coming. That's Mark Ridley. He used to live in the same trailer park as Mom and Dad before you were born. He died in a fire like a year before you came along. Dad used to work for him. He owned some local businesses. Not a great guy from what I've heard. My heart started pounding. How would I know about him? Why would I dream about him? I don't know. My brother shrugged, but I could tell he was disturbed. Have you asked Mom about him? I hadn't, but I did the next morning. The look on her face was answer enough. Where did you hear that name? She demanded. When I explained about the dreams, she sat down heavily at the kitchen table. I didn't want to freak you out, she said finally. We thought if we kept moving, eventually we'd leave it all behind, but it just keeps following us. It's not the houses, I said, suddenly understanding what I'd always suspected. It's us. We're the ones who are haunted. My mother nodded slowly. My grandmother had it too. The visions, the knowledge she shouldn't have. The visitors, she called them. That was 3 years ago. I'm 21 now, in my own apartment, and they're still here with me. The girl still crawls out from under my bed sometimes. The old man still puts his finger to his lips when I see him in my hallway. Mark still visits my dreams, though less frequently now. I've done research, tried cleansings, consulted psychics. Nothing works. They follow me wherever I go, these spirits or whatever they are. They're attached to me, to my family, not to any physical location. Sometimes I wonder what they want, why they've chosen us, if they'll ever leave. But mostly I've just learned to live with them, these uninvited guests who've been with me my entire life. Because what else can you do when the haunting isn't in your house, but in your blood? Story 13. I've never been the type to believe in supernatural stuff. Ghost stories were always just entertainment, you know? But after what happened last October in our little town of Millbrook, I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. I still get chills thinking about it, and I'm struggling to make sense of everything that happened that night. Millbrook is one of those tiny rural places that most people just drive through without noticing. We're talking one main street, a diner that closes at 8, and houses spread out across rolling farmland. It's usually peaceful here, the kind of quiet that city people find unsettling, but I've always found comforting, at least I used to. That October night started like any other. I was sitting at my kitchen table, nursing a cup of tea that had gone cold while I scrolled mindlessly through my phone. My house is at the edge of town, about a quarter mile from my nearest neighbor, which normally feels like a blessing. That night, though, the isolation felt different. The fog had rolled in thick around sunset, which isn't unusual for October in our area, but this was different. It was dense in a way I'd never seen before, like someone had wrapped my little one-story house in gray cotton. The only thing visible outside my window was the ghostly yellow glow of the street lamp at the end of my driveway, its light barely penetrating the wall of mist. My old Labrador, Max, was sleeping by the heating vent. He's 12 now, gray around the muzzle and slower than he used to be, but still protective. I remember thinking how peaceful he looked, completely unaware of how everything was about to change. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Kayla. She lives on the other side of town and works as a receptionist at the police station, so she always knows what's happening before anyone else. Did you hear about Margaret Willis? Her message read. I texted back, no. What about her? The typing dots appeared, disappeared, then appeared again, like Kayla was struggling with what to say. They found her dead in her house this morning. Doors locked, windows locked, no sign of forced entry. Sheriff says it's the strangest thing he's ever seen. I felt a chill run down my spine. Margaret was in her 60s, lived alone about a mile from me. I didn't know her well, just the occasional wave if we ran into each other at Peterson's grocery. What happened to her? I asked. That's the thing. They don't know. No visible injuries, just dead. And Leah, she's the third one this month. All found the same way. I stood up from the table and walked to my front window, peering out into the fog. Something about it suddenly felt oppressive, like it was pressing against the house with intention. Max shifted in his sleep, whimpering slightly. "Be careful, okay?" Kayla texted. "Sheriff thinks there might be a connection to the fog. People reported seeing strange things before each death." I was about to ask her what she meant when I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping at my front door. 3 distinct knocks, evenly spaced. My heart jumped into my throat. It was almost 11 at night, and no one in Millbrook visits without calling first, especially not on a night like this. I stood frozen, hoping whoever it was would go away. 3 more taps, slightly louder this time. Max woke up, his ears perked forward. He got to his feet slowly, staring at the door with a focus that made my skin crawl. I should have ignored it. Everything inside me was screaming to pretend I wasn't home. But some stupid part of my brain rationalized that it might be an emergency, someone whose car broke down in the fog, desperate for help. With shaking hands, I approached the door. Max followed, keeping close to my leg. "Who is it?" I called out, my voice embarrassingly thin. No answer, just another series of taps. I peered through the peephole, but all I could see was swirling fog. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain lock fastened. The figure standing on my porch was tall, at least 6.5 feet. They wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast a shadow over their face, and a long coat that seemed to move slightly even though there was no wind. The fog swirled around them in a way that wasn't natural, like it was part of them, or they were part of it. "Can I help you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. The figure tilted their head slightly. When they spoke, their voice was barely a whisper, but somehow I heard every word clearly, as if they were speaking directly into my ear. "I'm looking for someone," they said. The sound made my teeth ache, like fingernails on a chalkboard. "Someone who looks like you." Max started growling, a deep rumble that I could feel through the floorboards. He's never aggressive, not even with strangers, but he was baring his teeth now. "I don't know what you mean," I said. "There's nobody here but me." The figure leaned forward slightly, and although I couldn't see their face clearly, I had the distinct impression they were studying me, comparing me to some mental image. "Not yet," they whispered. "But soon. You'll see her soon, when the fog lifts." Before I could respond, they straightened up and took a step back. "I'll return," they said, and then turned and walked into the fog, disappearing within seconds. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely lock the door. Max was still growling, staring at the door like he could see through it. I grabbed my phone and called Kayla, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted her instead. "Someone just came to my door, tall person in a hat, said they were looking for someone who looks like me. I'm scared." I paced around the house, checking every window, making sure they were locked. The fog seemed to be getting thicker, pressing against the glass like it wanted to find a way in. Max wouldn't leave my side, which was both comforting and terrifying. If he was this spooked, something was very wrong. When my phone finally buzzed, I practically lunged for it. "Leah, listen to me. Other people have reported seeing the same person. Tall hat, always in the fog. Each time someone died the next day. The sheriff thinks it's some sick person playing games, but I'm not sure. Something feels wrong about all this. You need to come stay with me tonight." Before I could reply, another text came through. "Wait, did they say anything about someone who looks like you?" My fingers froze over the keyboard. "Yes. How did you know?" The typing dots appeared and disappeared several times before her answer came. "Margaret's neighbor said she saw the same figure the night before. Margaret died. It told her it was looking for someone who looked like Margaret. And then they found Margaret. Leah, I think you're next." I felt like I couldn't breathe. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some cruel prank or a coincidence. I tried calling Kayla again, but still no answer. I texted her back, "I'm coming to your place. Give me 20 minutes." I grabbed my car keys, but when I looked out the window toward my driveway, I couldn't even see my car through the fog. It was like a solid white wall. There was no way I could drive in this. I'd end up in a ditch before I made it to the main road. Can't drive in this fog, I texted Kayla. Going to barricade myself in. Please call the sheriff. Already did, she replied. He's sending a patrol car, but it'll take time in this weather. Stay on the phone with me. I locked every door and window, pulled all the curtains closed, and grabbed the baseball bat I keep under my bed. Max stayed glued to my side, his ears constantly shifting, listening for something I couldn't hear. Hours passed. I sat in my living room with all the lights on, jumping at every creak of the house settling. Kayla texted me every 15 minutes, but the patrol car was having trouble navigating in the fog. Around 3 in the morning, exhaustion was starting to win out over fear. Max had finally settled down, lying at my feet but still alert. I was considering moving to my bedroom where I could at least lie down while I waited for morning when I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Not on the front door this time. On my bedroom window. Max was on his feet instantly, hackles raised, a growl building in his chest. I gripped the baseball bat so hard, my knuckles turned white. Tap, tap, tap. I texted Kayla with shaking fingers. They're back, tapping on my window now. Her response was immediate. Don't go near the window, sheriff's almost there. But something drew me toward the sound. Some horrible curiosity I couldn't fight. I crept down the hallway, Max reluctantly following, his nails clicking on the hardwood floors. The tapping continued, patient and rhythmic. When I reached the bedroom doorway, I could see the curtains were still drawn, but there was a silhouette visible through them, the distinct outline of a person with a wide-brimmed hat. Tap, tap, tap. Now it was pressing skeletal fingers against the glass, and I could see the impression of them through the thin fabric of my curtains. Go away, I shouted, my voice breaking. The police are coming. The tapping stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe they'd left. Then the curtain moved slightly, like someone was leaning closer to peer through a gap. I couldn't see them, but I knew they could see me. She's here, came that horrible whisper, somehow audible through the glass and walls, like it was being spoken directly into my ear. At that exact moment, every light in my house went out. Max started barking frantically. I fumbled for my phone, turning on the flashlight. The beam caught something moving outside the window, not the figure, but the fog itself. It was seeping in around the window frame, thin tendrils of it curling into my bedroom like smoke. I backed away, tripping over Max and falling hard on the floor. My phone skidded away, the light spinning wildly across the ceiling before going out. The tapping started again, faster now, more insistent, not just on my bedroom window, but on every window in the house all at once, like there were dozens of them surrounding me. I crawled across the floor, searching desperately for my phone in the dark. My hand touched something cold and damp instead, a patch of fog that had somehow made it inside, swirling around my fingers like it was alive. I yanked my hand back and scrambled to my feet. Max was going crazy, barking and running from window to window like he didn't know which threat to face first. I finally found my phone wedged under the dresser. As I pulled it out, a text from Kayla lit up the screen. Leah, get out now, it's not human. The tapping suddenly stopped, leaving a silence so complete I could hear my own ragged breathing. Then a new sound, the slow turn of my front doorknob. I'd locked it. I know I locked it, but the door was opening anyway. Max ran toward the sound, barking furiously, then suddenly stopped. The silence that followed was worse than any noise could have been. Max, I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. No response, no padding of pause coming back to me. Nothing. The fog was filling my house now, so thick I could barely see a foot in front of me. It seemed to have weight and substance pressing against me from all sides, and through it, moving toward me with unhurried confidence, I could make out the silhouette of the tall figure with the hat. I ran. Through my bedroom, into the adjoining bathroom, locking the flimsy door behind me. I climbed into the bathtub, pressing myself against the cold porcelain, holding my breath as if that would somehow make me invisible. My phone lit up with another text from Kayla. "Where are you? Sheriff's there but can't find your house in the fog." I couldn't risk making a sound to reply. The fog was seeping under the bathroom door now, filling the small space. I covered my mouth and nose with my shirt, trying not to breathe it in. Then I heard it, that awful whisper, right outside the bathroom door. "I found her," it said, "the one who looks like you." The bathroom mirror began to fog over, not with steam, but with the same unnatural mist that was filling my house. As I watched, frozen in terror, something began to appear in the fog on the mirror. The outline of a face. My face, but not quite. The features were slightly wrong, the expression vacant and hollow. The bathroom door handle began to turn. That's when the sheriff's siren finally cut through the night. Distant but approaching. The handle stopped moving. The face in the mirror disappeared. The fog began to recede, pulling back like the tide. By the time the sheriff's flashlight beam cut through my broken front door, 10 minutes later, the fog was gone. Both inside and outside, the air was clear. Max was lying unharmed in the hallway, confused but okay. The sheriff found no sign of forced entry other than the front door his deputy had broken down to get in. No footprints in the mud outside my windows, no evidence anyone had been there at all. They took my statement, but I could tell they didn't believe me. Why would they? It sounds insane, even to me, and I lived through it. Kayla let me stay with her for a week after that. The fog didn't return. No one else died. Life in Millbrook slowly returned to normal, or something close to it. But I can't shake the feeling that it's not over, that whatever came for me that night is still out there, waiting for the right conditions, the right fog, and sometimes when I catch a glimpse of my reflection in a window or mirror, just for a split second, the face looking back doesn't seem quite like my own. Story 14. I still can't bring myself to talk about this, even after all these years. I'm shaking just typing this out, but I need to tell someone. Maybe one of you has experienced something similar or knows what the hell happened to me that summer in 1996. I was 11 years old, living in one of those generic apartment complexes in Richmond. You know the type. 3-story brick buildings arranged in a horseshoe around a sad little playground with a rusty swing set. My parents worked long hours, so my 9-year-old sister Amber and I spent most days roaming the grounds with the other latchkey kids from the building. There were 5 of us who hung out regularly. Me, Amber, twins Kevin and Kyle from the first floor, they were 12, and Marissa, who lived in the building across from ours, she was 10. We weren't allowed to leave the complex, but there was this small wooded area behind the dumpsters that we considered our secret spot. The adults never went there because it was overgrown and full of poison ivy, but we had cleared a little area and sometimes built forts or played explorer. It was late July, brutally hot and humid like only Virginia summers can be. We were bored out of our minds since our Nintendo was broken and the pool at the complex was closed because someone had thrown glass bottles in it. Kevin suggested we go to our spot in the woods to dig for treasure. Something we did occasionally when we ran out of other ideas. When we got there, Kyle had brought a small garden shovel he'd taken from his mom's balcony plants. We took turns digging random holes, pretending we were archaeologists. After about an hour of finding nothing but rocks and an old bottle cap, I remember Marissa complaining about the heat and saying we should go back. That's when Amber's shovel hit something that made a hollow wooden sound. "I found something," she yelled, and we all crowded around. It took us about 20 minutes to uncover it. A wooden box about the size of a cigar box, but older looking. It wasn't buried very deep, maybe 8 inches under the dirt. The wood was dark and weathered with these weird symbols carved into the top that I couldn't recognize. Not letters exactly, more like strange little pictures. Kyle managed to pry it open with a stick. Inside, nestled in what looked like dried-up leaves, were 3 brass bells. They were small, each about the size of a golf ball, and had the same bizarre markings etched into them as the box. They didn't look like any bells I'd ever seen before. They were a dull gold color with these weird symbols that seemed to wrap around them in a spiral pattern. We each reached for one at the same time. Me, Kevin, and Kyle. But Amber whined that she wanted one too, so I let her have mine, since I was the one who supervised the digging. Marissa said she didn't want one because they looked gross and old. Looking back, Marissa was the smart one. We spent the rest of the afternoon playing with those bells. They made this strange, hollow sound when you rang them. Not bright and cheerful like Christmas bells, but more like a distant echo. I remember Amber kept ringing hers over and over until I told her to stop because it was giving me a headache. When it started getting dark, we headed back home. Kevin and Kyle took their bell, and Amber insisted on bringing ours back to our apartment. I didn't think much of it, just some old bell we'd found. Mom was working late and Dad was cooking dinner when we got home. We showed him the bell, and he just glanced at it and said, "Neat, wash your hands for dinner." That night is when everything changed. I went to bed around 9:30. Amber had put her bell on our shared bookshelf between her Goosebumps books and my collection of X-Men comics. I remember looking at it before turning off the light, noticing how the streetlight outside our window made the brass gleam in this weird way, like it was wet. I fell asleep quickly, but what happened next still haunts me. The dream, if you can call it that, began with darkness, not just regular darkness, but a complete absence of light that felt thick, like being underwater in ink. I was falling through it, but couldn't feel air rushing past me or anything, just this sensation of endless dropping. The falling seemed to last forever, until suddenly I felt something brush against my arm. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it, cold fingers sliding against my skin. Then another touch on my leg and another on my back. White hands began emerging from the darkness, becoming visible even though there was no light source. Pale, bony fingers with too many joints reaching out of the black void, grabbing at my clothes, my hair, my ankles. I tried to scream but couldn't make a sound. The hands were pulling at me now, not violently but insistently, like they were trying to guide me somewhere I didn't want to go. I remember the overwhelming smell of something rotten, like meat, left out in the sun. That's when I saw it. A face materialized in front of me, so close our noses were almost touching. It looked almost human, but wrong in ways I struggle to describe. Its skin was gray and stretched too tight across its skull. Where eyes should have been were two dark holes with thick dark blood streaming down its cheeks like tears. Its mouth was open impossibly wide, showing blackened gums and needle-like teeth. It started screaming at me, not just wordless shrieks, but actual words. Horrible things. It knew my name. It called me worthless. Said my family would be better off if I died, that it was going to take Amber instead of me because she was purer. It kept repeating, "Ring the bell and I'll come. Ring the bell and I'll come." The voice wasn't just coming from this thing's mouth. It seemed to be inside my head too, reverberating through my entire body. I felt physical pain from the sound of it. That's when the nightmare shifted. Suddenly I wasn't in the void anymore. I was awake, or thought I was, standing in our apartment, except I wasn't in control of my body. I was watching myself from inside, unable to stop what I was doing. I walked to Amber's bed, grabbed her arm, and started pulling her out of bed. She woke up instantly and started crying, asking what I was doing, but I couldn't answer her. I couldn't stop. It felt like something else was using my muscles while I watched helplessly. I dragged her down the hallway while she screamed and fought against me. I remember her nails scratching deep into my arm as she tried to break free, but I couldn't feel the pain. I just kept pulling her toward the front door of our apartment. My dad came running out of his bedroom in his boxers, yelling at me to stop. He grabbed Amber around the waist and tried to pull her away from me, but I wouldn't let go. My mom appeared behind him, screaming my name, but it was like I couldn't hear them properly. Their voices sounded far away and distorted. Dad managed to wrap his arms around Amber and was trying to pry my fingers off her wrist, but it was like my hand was locked in place. I remember seeing the terrified look in Amber's eyes, the confusion and betrayal there, but still couldn't stop myself. My Uncle Ray was staying with us that week because he was in between apartments. He came out of the guest room and immediately understood something was seriously wrong. While my parents were focused on freeing Amber, he came straight for me. Ray grabbed me by both shoulders and started shaking me hard. He put his face right up to mine and screamed, "Wake up! Over and over, I remember his breath smelled like the cigarettes he wasn't supposed to be smoking in the apartment. When he slapped me across the face, not hard, but enough to shock me, something snapped. It felt like a rubber band breaking inside my mind. Suddenly I could control my body again, and I let go of Amber immediately. I collapsed on the floor, sobbing and confused, with no idea what had just happened or why. My family was staring at me like I was a monster. Amber was hysterical, her wrist bruised from where I'd been gripping her. Mom took her into their bedroom, while Dad and Ray stayed with me in the hallway. "What the hell was that?" Dad kept asking, but I couldn't explain. When I tried to tell them about the nightmare, the words wouldn't come out right. Every time I started to describe the face or the hands, my throat would close up and I'd start gagging. The next morning, Amber wouldn't look at me. My parents kept asking if I'd been sleepwalking before, if I was feeling sick, if something had happened at school. They thought maybe I'd had some kind of seizure or episode. Mom took me to the doctor that same day, but he couldn't find anything wrong with me. The weirdest part was that the bell was gone from our bookshelf. When I asked Amber about it, she just shook her head and refused to talk about it. I never saw it again. I called Kevin the next day to ask about their bell, but his mom said they'd both been sick with high fevers since the previous night. When I finally saw them a week later, neither of them would talk about the bell or what happened to it. My parents made me see a therapist for a while after that, but I never told her the whole story. How could I explain that finding those bells unleashed something that tried to use me to hurt my sister, that whatever came out of that box wanted to take her somewhere? It's been over 25 years, and I've never had another episode like that, but I still have nightmares about those white hands reaching out of the darkness. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night thinking I can hear a distant bell ringing. I've researched old artifacts and symbols over the years, trying to figure out what those markings meant, but I've never found anything that matches what I remember. Part of me wants to go back to that apartment complex and look for where we found the box, but I'm terrified of what might happen if those bells are still there. Has anyone else ever found something buried that they wish they'd left alone? Something that brought something back with it when you unearthed it? I need to know I'm not the only one this has happened to. Story 15. I still can't believe I'm finally writing this down. It's been 3 weeks since it happened, and I haven't been able to sleep properly since. My parents think I should see someone, a therapist or something. But how do I explain what happened that night without sounding completely insane? We moved to Blackwood Valley about a month ago. My dad couldn't stop bragging about the deal of a lifetime he'd found online. A massive 5-bedroom house sitting on 12 acres of forest land for just a quarter of what it should cost. I remember him showing us the listing, his eyes wide with excitement. "Look at this place. It's perfect for all of us," he kept saying. When we went to see it, I'll admit it was impressive. A 2-story colonial-style house with this huge wraparound porch, a separate garage big enough for 3 cars, and forest surrounding it on all sides. The closest neighbor was about 5 kilometers away. It seemed perfect for our big family. My parents, my older sister Emma, my grandparents who've been living with us since Grandpa's stroke last year, and our 3 dogs, Lisa, our German Shepherd, and the 2 labs, Tina and Maria. The old owner was this skinny guy in his 60s with these weird, darting eyes. He kept muttering about unworldly disturbances and how the house changes at night. Dad just nodded politely while exchanging these knowing looks with Mom. On the drive back, they laughed about it. "Poor old guy probably has dementia," Mom said. "No wonder he's selling so cheap." We moved in 2 weeks later. The first few days were just unpacking and getting settled. Everything seemed normal. The dogs loved the space, especially the forest trails behind the house. Grandma kept saying how the fresh air was doing wonders for Grandpa's health. Emma complained about the spotty internet, but that was about it. No unworldly disturbances, just a beautiful old house creaking a bit at night like old houses do. Then came my uncle's wedding. It was in Greenfield. about 3 hours away, and everyone was going to stay overnight for the reception. I couldn't go because I had my board exams coming up in a week and I needed to study. So it was decided I'd stay home with the dogs while everyone else went to the wedding. I didn't mind. I actually thought it would be nice to have the house to myself for once. I could blast my music while studying without Emma complaining or Grandpa asking me to turn it down. The morning they left, Mom left me a ton of food in the fridge, and Dad reminded me to keep the doors locked since we were so isolated. Not that there's anything to worry about, he added with a laugh. Just wild animals, maybe. I spent most of the day studying in the living room with the dogs curled up around me. Everything was fine until around 4 in the afternoon. I was deep into my biology notes when Lisa suddenly jerked up, her ears perked forward. She was staring at the kitchen doorway, growling low in her throat. "What is it, girl?" I asked, looking where she was looking. There was nothing there, just the empty kitchen doorway. But she wouldn't calm down. Then Tina and Maria started getting agitated too, both staring at the same spot. I got up and walked to the kitchen. Nothing seemed out of place. I checked the back door, locked just as I'd left it. I figured maybe they'd heard an animal outside, so I went back to studying. About an hour later, I was making a sandwich when I heard it. A soft thudding sound from upstairs, like someone walking slowly across the floor. My heart jumped into my throat. I froze, the knife still in my hand, listening. The dogs heard it too. All 3 of them were looking up at the ceiling, Lisa growling again. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid even as I said it. Of course, no one answered. I told myself it was just the house settling. Old houses make noises, but the dogs weren't buying it. They stayed alert, their eyes fixed on the ceiling. As daylight started fading, I began turning on lights around the house. That's when I noticed how cold it had gotten inside. It was summer, and the day had been warm, but now it felt like someone had cranked up an AC that we didn't have. I checked the thermostat. It was still set to the same temperature, but the house felt like a refrigerator. I put on a hoodie and tried to focus on studying, but by now I was distracted. The dogs wouldn't settle down. Lisa kept pacing between the living room and the bottom of the stairs, while Tina and Maria huddled together on the couch, whimpering occasionally. At around 8, I decided to make dinner. I was heating up some of the pasta Mom had left when all 3 dogs suddenly started barking frantically at the basement door. It was a different kind of bark, panicked, almost hysterical. Lisa was actually scratching at the door like she was trying to get in, or keep something from coming out. "Hey, stop it!" I shouted, but they ignored me completely. I approached the basement door, the dogs still going crazy. I put my hand on the doorknob and felt an intense chill run through my arm. It was like touching ice. I yanked my hand back immediately. That's when the lights flickered, just once, but enough to make my heart race. The dogs abruptly went silent. The sudden quiet was somehow worse than their barking. I backed away from the basement door and went back to the kitchen. My appetite was gone, but I forced myself to eat something. While I was eating, I heard it again. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate steps moving from one end of the hallway to the other. I sat frozen, listening as they crossed directly above me, then stopped. The rational part of my brain was scrambling for explanations. The house was settling. It was the wind. Maybe a raccoon had somehow gotten into the attic. But deep down, I knew it wasn't any of those things. By 9, it was fully dark outside. I tried watching TV to distract myself, but I couldn't focus. The dogs had gathered around me on the couch, all 3 pressed against me like they were seeking protection. From what? I didn't know. Then the TV started changing channels by itself. I'd be watching a show, and suddenly it would switch to static, then another channel, then back to static. I checked the remote, thinking maybe I was accidentally sitting on it, but it was on the coffee table. I turned the TV off, and that's when I noticed the shadows. In the corners of the room, the shadows seemed darker, deeper somehow, and if I looked at them directly, they seemed to shift and move, like something was stirring just beyond my vision. At 10, I decided to just go to bed. I figured whatever was happening, I'd be safer upstairs in my room with the door locked. I called the dogs to follow me, but they wouldn't budge from the couch. Lisa, who normally follows me everywhere, just whimpered and tucked her tail between her legs when I tried to get her to come. I didn't want to go upstairs alone, but I also didn't want to sleep on the couch with whatever was in the living room shadows. I grabbed my phone thinking I'd call my parents, but there was no signal. There never was great reception at the house, but usually I could at least get one bar. Now there was nothing. I gathered my courage and headed upstairs, turning on every light as I went. My bedroom was at the end of the hall. As I walked toward it, I felt like the hallway was getting longer with each step. The air got colder the closer I got to my room, and by the time I reached my door, I could see my breath. I pushed open my bedroom door and froze. The window was wide open, curtains billowing in the wind. I knew I hadn't left it open. It had been closed and locked since we moved in because it stuck slightly, and Dad had said he'd fix it eventually. I rushed to close it, struggling against the wind that seemed determined to keep it open. When I finally got it shut and locked, I turned around and nearly screamed. There was water on the floor, a small puddle seeping from under my closet door. But it wasn't water. It was too thick, too dark. In the dim light from my bedside lamp, it looked black. I backed away toward my bedroom door, but it slammed shut before I could reach it. I grabbed the handle, twisting frantically, but it wouldn't budge. The temperature in the room plummeted until I was shivering uncontrollably. Then I heard it, a soft, wet sound coming from my closet, like something damp being dragged across the floor. The puddle of dark liquid was expanding, creeping toward my feet. I screamed then, pounding on my bedroom door, calling for the dogs, even though I knew they were downstairs. To my surprise, the door suddenly gave way, sending me stumbling into the hallway. I didn't hesitate. I ran for the stairs, taking them two at a time. When I reached the living room, the dogs were gone. The couch where they'd been huddled was empty. I called for them, my voice breaking with panic. "Lisa, Tina, Maria!" A low growl came from the kitchen. I slowly turned toward the sound, praying it was just the dogs. Lisa stood in the kitchen doorway, but something was wrong. Her posture was stiff, unnatural, and her eyes weren't right. They reflected the light in a way I'd never seen before, shining like two small flashlights. "Lisa," I whispered. She took a step forward, still growling. Behind her, I could see Tina and Maria, standing just as rigidly, with the same strange glow in their eyes. I backed away, my mind racing. These weren't my dogs. They couldn't be. They looked like them, but something was very wrong. As I retreated, Lisa suddenly lunged forward. I barely had time to throw myself behind the couch before she sailed past me, crashing into the wall. She recovered instantly, turning to face me again with that same mechanical movement. I ran for the front door, fumbling with the locks with shaking hands. Behind me, I could hear all three dogs coming, their nails clicking on the hardwood floor. I finally got the door open and rushed outside onto the porch. The night air hit me like a wall, but it wasn't relief I felt. The forest surrounding our property seemed alive, swaying and shifting even though there was no wind. And there were sounds coming from between the trees, whispers, murmurs, words I couldn't quite make out but somehow understood were meant for me. I knew I couldn't stay on the porch, but I also couldn't go back inside. The dogs, or whatever they were now, were still in there, and I couldn't run into the forest, so I did the only thing I could think of. I climbed onto the porch roof via the trellis on the side of the house. I sat there, hugging my knees to my chest, watching as the three dogs emerged onto the porch below me. They paced back and forth, occasionally looking up at me with those glowing eyes. They didn't bark or growl anymore. They just watched, waiting. The hours crawled by. At some point, I must have dozed off despite my terror, because I woke to the sound of a car engine. Dawn was breaking, and my parents' car was coming up the driveway. I scrambled to the edge of the roof, waving frantically. My dad spotted me and slammed on the brakes, jumping out of the car. "Lucas, what the hell are you doing up there?" Before I could answer, the dogs ran to greet them, tails wagging, acting completely normal. My mom bent down to pet them, laughing as they licked her face. "The dogs," I croaked. They're not." But looking at them now in the morning light, they were just our dogs again. Lisa's eyes were her normal brown, not that terrifying glow. Tina and Maria were play fighting like they always did. My family helped me down from the roof. I was shivering despite the warm morning, and my teeth wouldn't stop chattering. I tried to explain what had happened, but the words sounded crazy even to me. My parents exchanged concerned looks, and my dad suggested I might have had a nightmare and sleepwalked onto the roof. I let them believe that. What else could I do? The house looked normal in the daylight. The puddle in my room was gone. The window was still stuck like it had always been. There was no evidence of anything I'd experienced, but I know what happened. And at night, when the house creaks and the shadows deepen, I can feel it watching me, waiting. My family doesn't believe me, but sometimes I catch the dogs staring at me with an intelligence that wasn't there before. And sometimes, just sometimes, I see that faint glow return to their eyes. We're still living in the house. My parents refused to even consider moving after they got such a great deal. But I don't sleep anymore. Not really, because I know what waits in the darkness of Blackwood Valley, and I know that sooner or later it'll come for me again. Story 16. I've been driving trucks for almost 17 years now, and I've seen some weird shit on the road. Sleep deprivation plays tricks on your mind when you're pushing those long hauls. But what happened to me last October on Highway 97 wasn't a hallucination or some kind of waking dream. I've replayed it in my head 1,000 times since then, and I'm still no closer to explaining it. I was hauling a load of electronics from Sacramento to Seattle, taking the inland route through Oregon. It was a clear night, cold as hell, with that kind of darkness you only get when you're miles from civilization, the kind where the headlights barely seem to penetrate more than a few feet ahead. I'd been driving since early afternoon, and by midnight I was fighting to keep my eyes open. The cab of my Peterbilt had gone from comfortable to claustrophobic, and I needed to stretch my legs, take a leak, and get some coffee before I ended up in a ditch. Highway 97 isn't exactly known for its amenities. It's a lonely stretch of road cutting through central Oregon, with towns few and far between. So when my headlights caught the reflective surface of a sign advertising Canyon Ridge Truck Stop, next exit, I felt a surge of relief. I hadn't seen another vehicle in at least 2 hours, and the fuel gauge was getting lower than I liked. I took the exit, following a narrow access road that curved around a bend and opened into a truck stop that looked like something from the 70s. Not necessarily unusual for these backroad places. The neon sign reading, "Open 24 hours," flickered weakly, but most of the outdoor lights were off. Even in the dim light, I could make out several big rigs parked in the lot. The moment I pulled in and killed the engine, something felt off. It wasn't just the unusual darkness or the lack of people moving around. It was something I couldn't put my finger on, a heaviness in the air that made the hair on my arms stand up. But when you've been on the road as long as I have, you learn to push through discomfort. I needed fuel, and I needed caffeine. As I climbed down from my cab, the first truly strange detail hit me. The trucks parked around the lot, maybe 7 or 8 of them, were all covered in a thick layer of dust and grime. Not the kind that builds up after a long haul, but the kind that comes from sitting untouched for weeks or months. Some had cobwebs stretching between their side mirrors and doors. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding flat in the still air. No answer. The gas pumps looked ancient but operational. I tried to start one up, but nothing happened. No lights, no prompt for payment, nothing. Frustrated and increasingly uneasy, I decided to head inside to find an attendant. The glass door to the diner section of the truck stop was unlocked. I pushed it open, and it moved silently on its hinges. No bell, no chime to announce a customer. The interior was dark except for a sickly yellow glow coming from somewhere in the back kitchen area. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "Anyone working tonight?" The place looked like a scene from one of those disaster movies where everyone vanishes in an instant. Tables were set with plates of food, burgers, fries, breakfast plates, all of it congealed and moldy. Coffee cups still half full, the liquid inside now a solid black mass. Napkins with lipstick stains, a pair of reading glasses beside an open trucker's logbook. The smell wasn't what you'd expect. Instead of the overwhelming stench of rotting food, there was just a stale emptiness, like the air in an attic that hasn't been opened in years. I remember thinking I should leave, that something was seriously wrong here, but curiosity pushed me forward. I've always been like that, needing to understand things, even when every instinct is screaming to run. That's when I heard them, the whispers. At first, I thought it was the ventilation system or maybe pipes expanding in the walls. But as I stood perfectly still in that abandoned diner, I realized I was hearing voices, hundreds of them, all speaking at once in hushed tones that blended together into a constant, unintelligible murmur. "Is anyone there?" My voice cracked slightly. The whispers seemed to pause for a split second before continuing, slightly louder now. I moved deeper into the diner, past the counter with its display case of desiccated pies, and toward the kitchen. The yellow light was stronger here, though I couldn't see its source. The whispers grew more distinct, but I still couldn't make out words, just the cadence of human speech, urgent and overlapping. That's when I noticed something I'd missed when I first entered. In the farthest booth, with its back to the window, sat a lone figure in a trucker's cap. From behind, he looked normal enough. Broad shoulders in a flannel shirt, completely motionless. Relief flooded through me. Another person. Someone who could explain what the hell was going on. "Hey, buddy," I called out, approaching the booth. "What's the deal with this place? Is there anyone working tonight?" No response, no movement, not even a slight shift to indicate he'd heard me. I was about 10 feet away when I noticed the window beside his booth. It was completely black outside, but the glass was acting as a mirror against the dim interior light. I could see the reflection of the booth and the man, except the reflection didn't match reality. In the window, I could see that the seated man wasn't sitting at all. His reflection showed him standing, pressed up against the glass from the outside, hands splayed against the surface. His face, Jesus, I'll never forget his face, was contorted in a silent scream, eyes wide and mouth stretched open in an expression of pure terror. But the actual figure in the booth remained seated, back still turned to me, completely motionless. I stumbled backward, knocking into a table and sending dirty plates crashing to the floor. The whispers surged into a frenzy at the noise, becoming louder, almost like static, but with distinct voices buried within it. "Can't leave. Been here since. Help us. Get out while..." I ran. I didn't look back at the booth or try to make sense of anything else. I bolted for the door, burst through it, and sprinted across the parking lot toward my truck. The night air hit my lungs like ice water, and I was gasping, not just from exertion but from pure, undiluted fear. That's when I saw the trucks, those dust-covered, abandoned rigs I'd noticed earlier. Now, in each one, I could make out the silhouette of a driver slumped behind the wheel. Dark figures, perfectly still, visible only in outline against the starlit sky. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get my key into the ignition. The whispers had followed me outside, growing louder by the second, a cacophony of desperate voices that seemed to be coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. The engine roared to life, and I threw the truck into gear, tearing out of that parking lot so fast I nearly jackknifed. In my mirrors, I could see the truck stop receding, and for just a moment I swear I saw dozens of figures standing in the lot, all of them perfectly still, watching my departure. The whispers stayed with me for miles, gradually fading as I put distance between myself and that place, but never completely disappearing until dawn broke over the mountains. I drove straight through to Seattle without stopping again, fueled by adrenaline and terror. The next day, after delivering my load, I tried to find information about Canyon Ridge Truck Stop. Nothing. It wasn't on any map, not even the specialized truckers' atlases. I asked other drivers at the distribution center if they'd ever heard of it. Most just gave me odd looks, but one older guy went pale when I mentioned Highway 97. "You don't stop on that stretch at night," he told me, refusing to elaborate further. "It's been 4 months now. I've taken other routes, avoiding Highway 97 entirely. I don't stop at unfamiliar truck stops after dark anymore. But the worst part isn't the fear or the changes to my routine. It's the whispers. They're fainter now, but they never completely went away. In quiet moments, when I'm alone in my cab or trying to sleep, I can still hear them at the edge of my consciousness. Sometimes, I can almost make out what they're saying. I think they're trying to call me back. Last week, I got a new assignment, another electronics haul to Seattle. The dispatcher gave me the route, Highway 97 through Central Oregon. I called in sick for the first time in my career. I can't go back there. I won't, because the thing that truly terrifies me isn't what I saw or heard at that truck stop. It's the overwhelming feeling I've had ever since, that I was supposed to stay, that I was meant to become one of those motionless figures behind the wheel, another victim of whatever haunts that stretch of Highway 97. Sometimes when I'm driving at night, I'll catch a glimpse of my own reflection in the side mirror. Just for a split second, it doesn't match my movements, and in those moments, I can hear the whispers surge, like they're welcoming me home. I don't know how much longer I can keep driving. Wah. Story 17. I've never been a believer in the paranormal. Ghost stories were always just that to me. Stories. I'm generally a logical person looking for rational explanations when weird things happen. But what's been going on in my house the past few weeks has completely shattered my understanding of reality, and I honestly don't know where else to turn. I moved to Ravenwood about 6 months ago after getting a decent job offer at the local medical center. It's one of those small towns where everyone knows everyone, but I mostly keep to myself. The house I found was perfect, a bit secluded at the edge of town, affordable, and honestly more space than I needed. It was built in the 1970s, nothing particularly remarkable about it. No tragic history that I know of, just a regular, slightly outdated home that needed some TLC. The first couple of months were completely normal. I settled into my job, started fixing up the place on weekends, and even met a few neighbors. Everything was fine until about 3 weeks ago. I was in the kitchen making dinner, nothing fancy, just some pasta. It was around 7 in the evening, and the sun was already setting. I felt this weird sensation, like someone was watching me. You know that feeling when the hairs on the back of your neck stand up? Yeah, that. I glanced to my right, toward the hallway that leads to the living room, and I swear to God, I saw something. It was just for a split second, but there was definitely a figure there, about my height, maybe a bit shorter. At first, I thought someone had broken in, but there was something off about it. It was completely black, like a silhouette, but three-dimensional somehow, and thin, unnaturally thin, like someone who was starving. I called out, thinking maybe it was just a shadow playing tricks on me, but when I walked to the hallway, nothing was there. I brushed it off as my imagination. Maybe I was working too hard, not getting enough sleep, but the next night, I saw it again. This time I was in the bathroom brushing my teeth before bed. In the mirror's reflection, I saw it standing in the doorway behind me. I spun around, but again, nothing was there. But this time I'd gotten a better look at it. The thing that disturbed me the most were its arms. They just ended. No hands, like whoever was designing this thing just forgot to finish it. Just stumps where hands should be. And it was so still, just standing there watching. I felt sick to my stomach. Over the next few days, these sightings became more frequent, sometimes just glimpses in my peripheral vision. But occasionally, I'd see it straight on, standing in a dark corner or at the end of a hallway. It never moved when I was looking directly at it, just stood there, silent and still. But the feeling it gave me, like I was being studied, observed, like a bug under a microscope. It made me feel small and vulnerable in my own home. I started keeping lights on all the time. I checked all the windows and doors multiple times each night. I even bought a security camera for the living room, but it never captured anything unusual. I thought maybe I was having some kind of mental break, but I wasn't hearing voices or having any other symptoms, just this thing. Then, about a week ago, the second one appeared. I was in bed, reading on my phone before sleep. It was around midnight. The room was mostly dark except for my phone screen and a small nightlight I'd started keeping plugged in. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but you do the same in my position. I felt the temperature drop suddenly, not like when the AC kicks on, but like when you open a freezer door. My breath actually fogged in front of my face. I looked up toward my bedroom door and saw it. This one was different, taller, much taller. It had to be at least 7 feet, maybe more, because its head nearly touched the top of my door frame, and it was wearing something on its head, like a hat or hood. The rest of it looked like it was wearing some kind of skin-tight black suit, but it wasn't clothing exactly. It was like the darkness itself had taken that form. The air around it felt wrong, heavy and thick, like trying to breathe underwater. My chest tightened and I couldn't move. Not like sleep paralysis. I've had that before, and this wasn't it. I was fully awake. This was pure fear freezing me in place. After what felt like forever but was probably only 30 seconds, it just wasn't there anymore. I didn't see it leave or fade away. One moment it was there, the next it wasn't. I didn't sleep that night, or much since then, to be honest. The two of them have been appearing regularly now. The smaller one, the thin one with no hands, shows up more frequently, usually just standing somewhere, watching. Sometimes I'll only catch it from the corner of my eye, but other times it's just there, fully visible even when I look directly at it. It never approaches me, never makes any sound or movement, just watches. The taller one is less frequent but more terrifying. It seems to bring that suffocating atmosphere with it. The air gets heavy, hard to breathe, and I feel this overwhelming sense of dread, like something horrible is about to happen. It doesn't just watch like the smaller one. It feels like it's assessing, deciding something. Last night was the worst so far. I was in the kitchen again, making a cup of tea because I'd given up on sleeping normally. It was around 3 in the morning. The smaller figure appeared at the entrance to the kitchen, just standing there as usual. I've almost gotten used to this one, as messed up as that sounds. I ignored it and continued making my tea. Then I felt that familiar drop in temperature, that heaviness in the air. I knew without turning around that the tall one was behind me. The small one was still in the doorway, so they were both present at the same time, which had never happened before. I was trapped between them. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor, but I barely registered the sound. The tall one was so close I could feel its presence right behind me, like a physical weight pressing against my back. Minutes passed like this, me, frozen in terror between these two shadow beings. Then suddenly, the pressure lifted. The temperature returned to normal. When I finally worked up the courage to turn around, they were both gone. I've tried to research what these things might be. Shadow people, hallucinations, some kind of rare shared manifestation of stress. Nothing quite fits what I'm experiencing. These aren't just fleeting shadows. They have distinct forms, patterns of behavior. The smaller one with its missing hands, the taller one with its hat, and that awful, suffocating presence. I've ruled out sleep paralysis completely. These encounters happen when I'm fully awake, moving around my house, doing normal activities. I've even tried recording them on my phone, but they never show up in photos or videos. Just another reason I feel like I'm losing my mind. I haven't told anyone about this until now. How do you even begin that conversation? Hey, so there are two shadow creatures living in my house. One's really skinny with no hands, and the other one's really tall and wears a hat. No big deal. Yeah, right. That's a one-way ticket to a psychiatric evaluation. But something happened this morning that pushed me to finally share this. I woke up around 6 and went to the bathroom. As I was washing my hands, I noticed something in the mirror. At first, I thought it was dirt or a smudge, but when I looked closer, I realized what it was. Handprints, or rather marks where hands should be. 2 round smudges on the mirror, exactly where the stumps of the smaller figure's arms would reach if it tried to touch the glass. They weren't there the night before, I'm certain of it, and on the bathroom floor, directly below the mirror, was a small puddle of water. But I hadn't splashed any water there while washing my hands. It was perfectly round, like someone had carefully placed it there. When I touched it, it was ice cold. I don't know what these entities are or what they want from me. They haven't physically harmed me, but the psychological toll is becoming unbearable. I'm jumping at shadows, barely sleeping, and constantly on edge. I've considered moving out, but something tells me they might follow me. They found me here for some reason, and I don't think a change of address will stop them. As I'm typing this, I can feel the temperature starting to drop in my room. The air is getting heavier. I know without looking up that one of them is here, probably the tall one based on how hard it's becoming to breathe. I don't want to look up. I can't look up, but I know it's there, watching me share this story. I don't know what to do anymore. I don't know if these things are harmful or just curious. I don't know if they're ghosts or demons or something else entirely. All I know is that they're real. They're in my house, and they're getting bolder. The handprints on the mirror proved that they can interact with physical objects. What happens when they decide to interact with me? Wait, the smaller one just appeared in the doorway. It's never been this close to the tall one before. They're both here now. The small one is just standing there, those arm stumps hanging at its sides. The tall one is behind me. I can feel it. The air is so thick I can barely breathe. They're doing something different this time. The small one is moving, actually moving. In all these weeks, I've never seen it move while I was looking directly at it. It's taking a step into the room, another step, moving toward me with a jerky, unnatural gait. The tall one is right behind me now. I can feel something cold brushing against the back of my neck. Not hands, not breath, just cold. I think they know I'm talking about them. I think they don't like it. I need to... Story 18. I've never been the type to believe in ghosts or any of that supernatural crap. Growing up Catholic, sure, I'd say I believe in God and the afterlife when asked, but it was more out of habit than actual conviction. I'm a plumber by trade. I deal with real problems that have real solutions. Leaky pipes, clogged drains, water heaters on the fritz, tangible stuff. That all changed after I moved in with my girlfriend Melissa and her 8-year-old son Ethan last December. It was a decent second-floor apartment in Staten Island. Nothing special but clean and in our price range. 2 bedrooms, open kitchen, living room setup, the usual. The building itself was maybe from the 60s or 70s, but renovated enough to be comfortable. The landlord seemed normal, neighbors kept to themselves. It felt like a fresh start for us. The first few months were completely normal. We settled in, established routines, and I was feeling good about where things were headed with us as a family. Ethan and I were getting along great. He's a good kid, into video games and dinosaurs. Melissa was happy that I was finally living with them instead of just staying over a few nights a week. Then April rolled around, and that's when everything started to go sideways. I remember the first incident crystal clear. It was a Tuesday afternoon around 2 o'clock. Melissa was at work, she's a dental hygienist, and Ethan was at school. I had taken a half day off because I needed to be home for a furniture delivery, a new entertainment center we'd ordered. I was sitting on the couch scrolling through my phone, just killing time while waiting for the delivery guys to call. That's when I heard it. A young woman's voice couldn't have been more than inches behind my head, clear as day. Robert Donovan. My full name, not Rob or Bobby like most people call me. Robert Donovan. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I whipped around so fast I dropped my phone, absolutely certain someone had somehow gotten into the apartment and was standing right behind the couch. But there was nobody there, just the wall. I checked every room, every closet, under the beds, behind the shower curtain. Nothing. Doors and windows all locked. I even stepped out into the hallway to see if anyone was playing a prank, but it was empty. I felt like I was losing my mind. I didn't tell Melissa about it that night. What was I going to say? Hey babe, I heard a ghost whisper my full name today. She'd think I was nuts. So I kept it to myself and tried to forget about it. About a week later, it happened again. This time I was in the kitchen making a sandwich, same voice, same clarity, same proximity, like someone was standing right behind me, speaking directly into my ear. Robert Donovan. I spun around, knife still in hand, heart pounding. Again, nothing there. After that, things escalated quickly. A few days later, I heard what sounded like an elderly man clearing his throat behind me while I was folding laundry, followed by my name again. This time it was a different voice entirely, deeper, rougher, older. By late April, I was hearing things almost daily, not just voices calling my name, but other sounds too. Growling noises coming from empty corners of rooms, hissing sounds from inside the walls. The worst was the breathing, heavy, unnatural breathing that would seem to circle around me when I was alone in a room. The first time I felt something touch me, I nearly had a heart attack. I was washing dishes, and I distinctly felt fingers brush across the back of my neck. Light, almost gentle, but unmistakably a touch. I dropped a plate, and it shattered in the sink. When Melissa came running to see what happened, I blamed it on soapy hands. The cold spots started in May. I'd be walking through a perfectly normal room and suddenly hit a patch of air that was freezing cold, like walking into a walk-in freezer. But it wasn't just cold. It had this weird electrical quality to it, like static electricity running across my skin. The first few times I experienced it, I checked the vents, looked for drafts, anything that could explain it. Nothing did. Then came the visual stuff. Shadows moving across walls when nothing was casting them. Dark silhouettes passing by the shower curtain when I was in the bathroom alone. Once, while brushing my teeth, I swear I saw a woman's face briefly appear in the mirror behind me. Not clear enough to make out features, just an impression of a face watching me. I choked on toothpaste and spent 5 minutes coughing over the sink. The most disturbing incidents involved the mimicry. I'd hear Melissa's voice calling me from the bedroom when she was actually at work, or I'd be talking to her in the kitchen and she'd respond to something I said, only for me to turn around and find the room empty. When the real Melissa would come home later, she'd have no memory of these conversations. One evening in early June, Melissa was giving Ethan a bath, and I distinctly heard her call my name from the living room. When I walked in, asking what she needed, I found no one there. When I went back to the bathroom and asked why she'd called me, she looked at me like I was crazy and said she hadn't left the bathroom. The knocking was constant by that point, sometimes gentle taps on walls or doors, other times violent banging that would wake me from a dead sleep. We'd hear what sounded like objects falling in other rooms, a crash or thump that would send me running to investigate, only to find nothing out of place. The weirdest part? After the initial shock wore off, I wasn't as terrified as I should have been. Don't get me wrong, it was unsettling as hell, but I found myself more curious than afraid. I started recording audio when I was alone in the apartment. I set up my phone to take random videos when I wasn't around. I needed to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind, and I got evidence. Whispers on audio recordings that I couldn't hear in real time. Shadows moving on video when no one was home. One recording captured 3 distinct knocks followed by a woman's laughter, and I was the only one in the apartment at the time. The most beautiful thing I ever heard from whatever was in that apartment was a humming sound. I was in the shower one morning, and suddenly there was this angelic female voice humming a melody I didn't recognize. It was so beautiful, it brought tears to my eyes. It lasted maybe 30 seconds before fading away. I've never heard anything like it before or since. By July, I couldn't hide what was happening anymore. Melissa had experienced enough herself that she knew something was wrong with the apartment. The final straw for her came when Ethan started talking about the old man who watches me sleep. He described him exactly: tall, thin, with a beard and glasses. We'd never mentioned anything about an old man to him. One night in mid-July, I woke up around 3 in the morning to find Melissa sitting straight up in bed, staring at the bedroom doorway. When I asked her what was wrong, she just pointed. I saw nothing, but she was transfixed, watching something move that I couldn't see. "There's a woman standing there," she whispered. "She's looking right at you, Rob." The next day, I finally broke down and started researching the building's history. I couldn't find anything specific about our unit, but I discovered that the land the apartment complex was built on used to be part of an old hospital property back in the 40s. The hospital had been demolished in the 60s to make way for residential development. I'm not claiming to be psychic or special in any way. I'm just a regular blue-collar guy who stumbled into something I can't explain. Whatever was in that apartment seemed to fixate on me specifically. The voices knew my full name from the beginning before I'd ever spoken it aloud in those rooms. What really gets me is how it felt like there were multiple things there with us. Not just one ghost or spirit or whatever you want to call it. The young woman's voice was distinct from the old man's. The breathing sounds seemed to come from something else entirely. It was like our apartment had become Grand Central Station for whatever exists on the other side. The activity seemed to follow patterns, more intense at night, but not exclusively, more focused on me, but eventually affecting Melissa and Ethan too. Some entities seemed curious or even friendly, while others felt malevolent. The growling and hissing always made the hair on my arms stand up. We moved out in September, just 7 months after moving in, broke the lease and lost our security deposit, but we couldn't take it anymore. The final night there, as we were packing the last of our things, I was alone in the bedroom when I heard that first voice again, the young woman, right behind me. "Goodbye, Robert Donovan." That was 8 months ago. We're in a different apartment now, in a different part of Staten Island. Things have been quiet here, normal, but I still think about that place almost every day. I still have the recordings, the evidence of what happened, though I rarely listen to them anymore. They freak Melissa out too much. I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I know how this sounds. If someone had told me this story 2 years ago, I'd have thought they were making it up or needed psychiatric help. All I know is what I experienced, what we all experienced. Whatever was in that apartment knew my name before I ever said it out loud. It watched us, touched us, spoke to us, and sometimes, even in our new place, when I'm alone and the apartment is completely silent, I swear I can still hear that humming. Story 19. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. 15 years have passed since that day at my grandmother's house in Glenvale, but I can recall every detail like it happened yesterday. I've never shared this publicly before, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe someone else has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of it all. I was 10 years old that summer. School had just let out, and my parents shipped me and my little brother Tommy off to Grandma Miller's place in Glenvale, Connecticut for 2 weeks while they took a second honeymoon cruise. Looking back, I think they just needed a break from us. I didn't mind though. I loved Grandma's house. It was this massive Victorian thing with a wraparound porch, 3 stories, and a fenced backyard that seemed enormous to my 10-year-old self. What most people don't know about Grandma's house is that it actually had a small chapel inside. Yeah, a literal chapel with stained glass windows and everything. The previous owners had been super religious apparently, and they'd converted one of the rooms into this mini church. Grandma never removed it, which I always found weird considering what I'd later discover about her, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That particular day, June 15th, 2008, was sweltering hot. Tommy was napping inside with Grandma, who always took these long afternoon naps. I was bored out of my mind, so I decided to play in the backyard. The neighborhood was pretty typical suburban Connecticut. Neat houses, well-trimmed lawns, the town green just a couple blocks away. You could hear cars passing by, kids riding bikes, normal suburban stuff. I was kicking around a soccer ball, pretending I was scoring the winning goal in the World Cup, when I got this sudden feeling that someone was watching me. You know that prickly sensation on the back of your neck? Like that, but 10 times stronger. I turned around and that's when I saw it. Standing by the big oak tree at the far end of the yard was the biggest wolf I'd ever seen. And I don't mean like a regular wolf that you'd see at a zoo. This thing was massive, like the size of a small horse. Its fur was this deep, unnatural black that seemed to absorb the sunlight around it. But what really froze me in place were its eyes. They were glowing red, not like reflection red, but actually emitting light, like 2 burning coals. This wasn't some stray dog. This wasn't even a normal wolf. This was something else entirely, and it was just standing there, completely still, staring at me, not growling, not approaching, just watching. I couldn't move. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. Time seemed to stretch out forever as we stared at each other. The strangest part? The world around us seemed to go quiet. The neighborhood sounds, cars, distant voices, even the birds, just stopped. All I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then it blinked, and that broke the spell. I screamed and ran toward the house as fast as my legs would carry me. I didn't look back until I slammed the back door behind me, breathing like I'd run a marathon. Grandma was still napping and Tommy was watching cartoons in the living room. Neither of them had heard me scream. After catching my breath, I crept to the kitchen window that overlooked the backyard. The rational part of my brain was already trying to explain it away. Maybe it was a big dog, or I imagined it, or it was some weird shadow trick, but I needed to see for myself. The yard was empty. The wolf was gone. Now here's where things get truly bizarre. Our backyard had an 8-foot privacy fence all the way around it. The only exit was through the gate, which was latched shut. I could see it clearly from the window. There was no way that enormous creature could have jumped that fence without making noise, and it definitely couldn't have opened the gate. It was just gone. I spent the rest of the afternoon inside, jumping at every sound, but I didn't tell Grandma or Tommy. What would I even say? Hey, I saw a monster wolf with glowing eyes that disappeared into thin air. They'd think I was making it up for attention. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those burning red ones staring back at me. Around midnight, I heard Tommy get up to use the bathroom across the hall. Our rooms were on the second floor, with Grandma's master bedroom on the first floor and the chapel and attic on the third. Tommy didn't come back after a few minutes, so I got up to check on him. That's when I heard his voice from the hallway. "Ethan," he whispered, his voice shaking. "There's someone on the stairs." I walked to the hallway and saw Tommy frozen at the top of the staircase, looking down. I followed his gaze and felt my blood turn to ice. Standing halfway up the staircase to the third floor was a tall, dark figure. It was wearing what looked like a black robe that reached the floor, with a hood pulled so far forward I couldn't see a face. Just darkness. It was exactly what you'd imagine the Grim Reaper to look like, minus the scythe. The figure was completely still, just like the wolf had been, just watching us. I grabbed Tommy's arm and pulled him backward toward my room, never taking my eyes off the figure. As we moved, it slowly turned its head to follow our movement. Still, there was no face visible inside that hood, just emptiness, a void deeper than any darkness I'd ever seen. We backed into my room, and I closed the door as quietly as I could, then pushed my desk chair under the doorknob. Tommy was crying silently, tears streaming down his face. "What was that?" he whispered. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But we're staying in here until morning." We huddled together in my bed, too terrified to sleep. After what felt like hours, curiosity got the better of me. I had to know if it was still there. I removed the chair and cracked the door open just enough to peek out. The hallway was empty, but I could have sworn I heard footsteps from the third floor, from the direction of the chapel. Soft, deliberate steps, and then silence. We didn't sleep at all that night. When morning came, Tommy and I went downstairs together, jumping at every creak in that old house. Grandma was already in the kitchen making pancakes like nothing had happened. We didn't mention what we'd seen. Again, what would we say? The rest of our stay passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I avoided the backyard completely and made sure Tommy and I were never alone in the house if Grandma went out for groceries or to visit her friends. It wasn't until years later, when I was 17, that I started to connect the dots. Grandma had passed away the previous winter, and my parents and I were cleaning out her house to sell it. I was going through boxes in the attic, right next to that chapel, when I found a hidden compartment in the floor. Inside were books, old leather-bound books with strange symbols on them. There were jars of dried herbs and crystals, candles that had burned black, and what looked like animal bones arranged in patterns. My mother found me staring at this collection and quickly closed the compartment, telling me to forget what I'd seen. Later that night, I overheard my parents arguing. Dad was saying she promised she'd stopped all that nonsense years ago, and Mom replying, "What did you expect? It's been in her family for generations." That's when I learned that my sweet old grandmother, who baked cookies and knitted sweaters, had practiced witchcraft or some kind of black magic. Not the harmless Wiccan stuff, but something darker, something that had apparently been passed down through her family. Everything suddenly made a twisted kind of sense. The wolf with impossible eyes, the hooded figure on the stairs, the chapel that she'd kept intact despite her practices. Had she summoned something? Was the house some kind of doorway for these entities? Were they guardians or demons or something else entirely? I'm 25 now. I still live in Connecticut, though I avoid Glen Vale whenever possible. My parents never fully explained what Grandma was involved in, and now they refuse to discuss it at all. Tommy says he doesn't remember the hooded figure, but I think he's just blocking it out. Sometimes I drive by the old house. A new family lives there now. I wonder if they've experienced anything strange, if they've felt eyes watching them, or seen impossible things in broad daylight. I wonder if they've discovered the hidden compartment in the attic or noticed anything unusual in that chapel. I've done research over the years, looking into local legends, witch covens in New England, anything that might explain what we saw. There are stories about Black Shuck, a spectral wolf with glowing eyes from English folklore, but that doesn't explain why one would appear in suburban Connecticut. And the hooded figure, well, there are too many possibilities there, none of them comforting. The hardest part is that these weren't dreams or hallucinations. I wasn't alone. Tommy saw the figure too, and that wolf, the way the sounds disappeared around it, the impossible way it vanished from a closed yard. I know what I saw. I still have nightmares where I'm back in that yard with those burning red eyes staring into mine. In the worst ones, the wolf speaks to me, though I can never remember what it says when I wake up. Just the terror remains. I don't know what my grandmother unleashed or invited into her home. I don't know if those entities were connected to her or just drawn to whatever energy her practices created. All I know is that for a brief moment, the veil between our world and something else thinned enough for me to see through it. The rational part of me wants to dismiss it all as childhood imagination and coincidence, but deep down, I know better. There are things out there that we don't understand, things that can take forms both terrifying and impossible, and sometimes they watch us from the shadows of a suburban backyard in the middle of a sunny afternoon, waiting for us to notice them. Story 20. I've been an officer with the Blue Hills PD for 17 years now, seen my fair share of domestic disputes, drunk drivers, and petty theft. Nothing that would keep me up at night. Blue Hills is that kind of town, peaceful, predictable, where the biggest drama might be someone's dog getting loose or teenagers spray painting the water tower. At least that's what I thought until last Tuesday. I was working the night shift, just like any other. Around 11:30, dispatch called in about a possible prowler at 43 Pinewood Avenue. Nothing unusual about that. Sometimes we get calls from paranoid homeowners who mistake shadows for intruders, but it's our job to check it out anyway. Pinewood Avenue is one of those picture-perfect suburban streets. Nice houses, manicured lawns, kids' bikes left out on driveways because nobody worries about theft. Number 43 was a colonial-style house with a white picket fence, literally the American dream in architectural form. I remember thinking how strange it was to get a call from this neighborhood as I pulled up across the street, cutting my headlights but leaving the engine running. I did a quick scan with my flashlight before getting out, standard procedure. That's when I first saw it. A tall, thin figure in what looked like a dark hoodie standing motionless at the edge of the property line, just watching the house. My first thought was that I'd caught our prowler red-handed. "Police officer, I need to speak with you," I called out, stepping from my vehicle. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it turned slowly toward me, and though I couldn't see a face in the shadows of the hood, something about the way it moved sent a chill down my spine. Then it bolted, not running exactly, more like gliding away with unnatural speed toward the wooded area behind the houses. I radioed in that I was in pursuit of a suspicious person and took off after it. I'm in decent shape for 43, but whatever I was chasing moved with impossible quickness. It disappeared into the trees before I could get close. The weird part, when I stopped running and tried to catch my breath, I felt watched. Not just the normal feeling of being in dark woods at night. This was different, intense, deliberate. Like dozens of eyes were focused on me from every direction. I tried calling for backup on my radio, but all I got was static. Figured it was the trees interfering with the signal. I swept my flashlight in a complete circle, seeing nothing but darkness between the tree trunks. The feeling of being observed didn't fade. After a few minutes, I gave up and headed back to check the house. No signs of forced entry, windows all secure, family inside completely unaware anyone had been lurking around their property. I filed it as an unsubstantiated prowler report and headed back to finish my patrol. That should have been the end of it. The next night, Wednesday, I got the exact same call, same address, same report of a prowler, same time, 11:32 according to dispatch. I remember checking my watch to confirm, thinking it was odd to get identical calls on consecutive nights. When I arrived at 43 Pinewood, I had this knot in my stomach. Something felt wrong before I even stepped out of the car. The house looked the same, but the street felt emptier, quieter. Not a single porch light was on in any of the neighboring houses, no sound except the idle of my patrol car engine. I did a perimeter check, moving slowly with my flashlight. Nothing at the front of the house, nothing along the sides. But when I reached the backyard, I heard it, whispering, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. "Hello?" I called out, hand instinctively moving to my holster. "This is Officer Harris with the Blue Hills Police Department. Anyone back here needs to identify themselves now." The whispering stopped. Then, from the shadows at the back of the yard, I saw it again. The same tall, thin figure from the night before. Only this time, as it stepped forward, my flashlight beam caught its face. Except there was no face. Where features should have been was just a smooth, blank surface, like a mannequin or a mask, but it moved with the figure's head. No eyes, no mouth, just a pale, featureless oval. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. Then it started walking toward me, not rushing, just a steady, deliberate approach. Its movements were fluid but wrong somehow, like watching someone try to imitate how a human walks without quite getting it right. "Stop right there!" I shouted, drawing my weapon. My voice sounded thin and scared even to my own ears. "Do not come any closer." It kept coming. I fired a warning shot into the ground, the sound cracking through the night air. The figure didn't even flinch. It just kept coming, and now I could hear the whispering again, louder, coming from all around me, though I still couldn't make out any words. I'm not ashamed to admit I ran. 17 years on the force, and I ran like hell back to my patrol car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the key in the ignition. I locked the doors and grabbed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Harris. I need immediate backup at 43 Pinewood Avenue. Possible." What? What the hell was I even reporting? Possible hostile subject. Behavior suggests mental instability or intoxication. The radio crackled, and through the static I heard a voice. Not dispatch, not any voice I recognized. "There's no need for backup, Officer Harris. We're already here." My blood went cold. I looked up into my rearview mirror and saw them. Dozens of identical figures with blank, featureless faces standing in the street behind my car. Some were in the yards, some right up against the vehicle, all perfectly still, all facing me. I tried the ignition. Nothing. The car was dead. I reached for my gun, but my holster was empty. I know I didn't drop it. It was just gone. Panic took over completely. I tried the radio again, pressing the button repeatedly, shouting for help. Nothing but that same whispering coming through the speaker now. louder and clearer. "Join us, join us, join us." I looked out the windows. They had completely surrounded the car. Standing shoulder to shoulder, a wall of faceless figures. One of them stepped forward and placed its pale, smooth hand on my window. The glass frosted over from its touch, ice crystals spreading outward in impossible patterns. Another was at the passenger window, another at the back. More hands touching the car, the metal groaning as if under immense pressure. The temperature inside plummeted. I could see my breath. My fingers were going numb. Something grabbed my wrist. I looked down to see a pale, featureless hand had somehow phased through the door and was gripping me. Its touch was like ice, burning cold, sending shooting pain up my arm. I tried to pull away but couldn't move. Looking back up, I saw one of them right in front of the car now, its blank face pressed against the windshield, head tilting to the side like a curious dog. Though it had no eyes, I could feel it studying me, assessing me. The windshield began to crack under some invisible pressure. The whispering was inside the car now, inside my head. "You've seen us. Now we've seen you. Now you belong with us." The last thing I remember is that face, that no face, pressing against the glass as the windshield shattered inward. Then darkness. I woke up 3 days later in a hospital room. They found my patrol car at the end of Pinewood Avenue, door wide open, engine cold, no fingerprints except mine, no evidence anyone else had been there. The family at 43 Pinewood claims they never called about a prowler. Not that night, not the night before. Dispatch has no record of sending me there. The doctors say I had hypothermia when they found me, my body temperature dangerously low despite the mild spring weather. There were marks on my wrist, perfect finger-shaped bruises, ice white against my skin. They faded now, but I can still feel the cold there, like the memory of that touch is frozen into my cells. I've been on administrative leave for the past week. The department psychologist thinks I had some kind of breakdown or hallucination. Maybe carbon monoxide poisoning from my patrol car. Maybe a stroke. They're running tests, but everything comes back normal. But I know what I saw, what I felt. The worst part? I drove past Pinewood Avenue yesterday. Couldn't help myself. Had to see it in daylight, convince myself it was just a normal street. And it was. Kids playing, people mowing lawns. But number 43, it was empty. For sale sign in the yard. When I asked a neighbor about it, they said the family moved out suddenly last week. No explanation, just packed up and left. And as I was sitting there in my car, staring at that house, I swear I heard it again, that whispering, just at the edge of hearing. I drove away as fast as I could. I don't know what happened to me that night. I don't know what those things were. But I know they're still out there. And sometimes when I catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror now, I swear my face looks smoother, less defined, just for a second. And last night I woke up standing in my backyard at exactly 11:32. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't know how much time I have left before they come back for me. But I needed someone to know what happened, what's still happening. If you live near Blue Hills, stay away from Pinewood Avenue after dark. And if you hear whispering outside your window, don't look. Oh, it's Story 21. I still can't believe I actually live here. Every morning when I wake up and look out at the river, part of me expects to find myself back in that cramped apartment, listening to my ex-husband's voicemails demanding more of what I didn't have to give. But here I am, 6 months into owning my dream home. Even if that dream has turned into something I never could have imagined, I suppose I should have known better. The listing price was suspiciously low for a waterfront Victorian in Millbrook. My realtor kept emphasizing what a unique opportunity it was, her smile tightening each time I pointed out another problem. The interior was absolutely trashed, not just neglected, but violated somehow. Cabinet doors hanging off hinges, strange stains on the hardwood, and walls that had clearly been patched multiple times. The layout made no sense either. Who designs a waterfront home with most of the windows facing away from the water? Several of the rooms had views that had been walled off at some point, as if someone had deliberately tried to hide the river. but I was so desperate for a fresh start after the divorce, and the idea of owning waterfront property on my teacher's salary was too tempting to pass up. "Mum, this place is gross," my daughter Lily said when I first brought her to see it. She wasn't wrong, but all I could see was potential. The property had two buildings, the main Victorian house and this older, separate garage structure with what the listing called a bonus room above it. The previous owners had converted it into some kind of man cave, but it gave me the creeps from day one. The energy in there was heavy. I can't explain it better than that. My friend Cassandra, who's into all that witchy stuff I used to roll my eyes at, came with me during the final walkthrough. She stopped dead in her tracks halfway through the tour. "Liz, there's been violence here," she whispered, grabbing my arm so hard it left marks. "Something bad happened in this house." I brushed her off. Cass has always been dramatic, and I couldn't afford to let her supernatural hunches derail my plans. The closing went through in 45 days, and I spent the next 3 months making the place habitable before Lily and I moved in. That's when things got weird. The first incident was small enough to dismiss. I put my coffee mug down on the kitchen counter while unpacking boxes, turned around to open another box, and the mug was gone. I spent 20 minutes searching before giving up. 2 weeks later, it reappeared in the exact same spot as if it had been there all along. Then came the antiques. I'd never owned a single piece of Victorian furniture or decor, couldn't afford it, but somehow these items started appearing throughout the house. A silver hand mirror on my dresser, a child's porcelain doll sitting on the windowsill in the hallway, an ancient-looking shaving kit in the bathroom cabinet. When I asked Lily if she'd found these things in the attic or basement, she looked at me like I was crazy. "Mum, I don't go in the attic. It's creepy up there." The light orbs were harder to explain away. We're isolated out here, no traffic on our road after dark, yet almost nightly I'd see these spheres of light drifting through rooms, reflecting in mirrors, hovering near the ceiling. I researched everything from dust particles to camera flares, but none of the explanations fit what I was seeing. The knocking in the walls started about a month after we moved in. At first I assumed it was the plumbing or the house settling, but then I noticed a pattern. The knocking intensified whenever Lily and I argued. One night, during a particularly heated discussion about her grades, the knocking became so violent that a picture fell off the wall. We both stared at it, argument forgotten. "Is someone in the walls?" Lily whispered, her anger replaced by fear. I checked every inch of the house that night, telling myself it was just an old house being temperamental. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the knocking had been responsive, almost like someone was trying to interrupt us. The breaking point came when Lily ran downstairs one Saturday morning, white-faced and trembling. "Someone was in my room," she said, her voice shaking. "A man." My heart nearly stopped. "What do you mean? Did you see someone?" She shook her head. I was singing to myself while getting dressed, and I heard a man's voice clear as day, right behind me. He said, "Shut your mouth, little lady." I turned around and no one was there, but Mom, I heard him. I swear I did. I called the police, who came out and found nothing. No signs of entry, no footprints in the soft ground outside her window. The officer was kind, but I could tell he thought it was just a teenage girl's imagination. After they left, I took Lily to stay with my sister for the weekend while I tried to figure out what to do. That's when I finally decided to talk to my neighbor, Fred. He's lived next door for over 40 years and always seemed hesitant to chat whenever I waved from the yard. I caught him retrieving his mail and asked point blank about the history of my house. His face went slack. "You don't know." "Know what?" He looked around as if worried someone might overhear, then motioned for me to follow him onto his porch. "There was a murder there. About 15 years back, husband killed his wife in that garage of yours, beat her to death with a tire iron." My stomach lurched. "In the garage, not the house?" Fred nodded grimly. "In that room above the garage. It was his workshop or something. Police said the place was covered in blood. They never did find all of her." He trailed off, noticing my expression. I'm sorry. I thought the disclosure forms would have mentioned it. They hadn't. I checked all my paperwork later that day and found nothing about a murder. A call to my realtor confirmed my suspicion. The bank that had foreclosed on the property wasn't legally obligated to disclose deaths that occurred there since they weren't the original owners. I should have put the house back on the market immediately. Any rational person would have. But somehow, knowing there was a concrete reason behind the strangeness made it less frightening. The house wasn't going insane. It was haunted. And as bizarre as it sounds, that was actually comforting. When Lily came home, I told her everything Fred had shared. I expected her to refuse to stay another night, but instead, she seemed fascinated. So it's a ghost, she said matter-of-factly. That actually makes sense. We started cataloging the strange occurrences after that. Objects continued to disappear and reappear. Doors we'd closed would be open in the morning. Sometimes we'd hear footsteps crossing the ceiling when both of us were downstairs. The house was communicating with us in its way. The cellar was a whole other mystery. I'd avoided going down there because the previous owners had filled it with river stones, thousands of them covering the dirt floor nearly a foot deep. When I finally got the courage to investigate properly, I found carvings in the ancient wooden support beams, symbols I didn't recognize, along with dates going back to the 1800s. My research at the local historical society revealed that my house had once belonged to a riverboat captain who was rumored to smuggle goods up and down the waterway. The stones in the cellar were likely ballast from his boats, but that didn't explain why someone had arranged them in distinct patterns, or why they occasionally would shift overnight into new formations when the cellar door was firmly locked. I started calling our ghost Old Man, picturing him as that gruff boat captain rather than the murderer from the garage. It felt better that way. I'd talk to him sometimes, especially when alone in the house. I'd thank him when lost items reappeared or scold him when doors slammed during the night. The strangest part is that over time, I began to feel protected rather than threatened. When my ex-husband showed up drunk one evening, pounding on the door and demanding to see Lily, all the lights in the house flickered violently. He left quickly, glancing nervously over his shoulder as he retreated to his car. 3 months ago, I finally got the courage to renovate the space above the garage. It had been sitting empty since we moved in, but we needed the extra room as Lily was entering her teen years and wanted space for friends. The construction crew reported tools going missing, batteries draining instantly, and a persistent cold spot near the north wall, where Fred had indicated the murder took place. When they finished, I went up alone to sage the space as Cassandra had taught me. I still wasn't fully bought into the spiritual stuff, but it couldn't hurt. The moment I entered the newly finished room, the temperature plummeted. My breath fogged in front of my face despite it being June. I know what happened here, I said aloud, my voice shaking slightly. I'm not afraid of you. That was a lie, but somehow saying it made it more true. I walked the perimeter of the room, sage smoke trailing behind me. When I reached the north wall, my entire body went ice cold. Not just chilled, it was like being submerged in frozen water. I couldn't move or speak for what felt like minutes. Then came the most profound experience of my life. I can't adequately describe it, but it was like someone was sharing their memories with me. Not the murder. Something older, deeper. Flashes of the river when it ran wild before the dams. Children playing on the banks in clothes from another century. A profound grief that wasn't my own, yet somehow was. I sank to my knees, overwhelmed by emotions I couldn't identify as mine. Tears streamed down my face as I processed feelings of loss, regret, and a strange sense of guardianship. When it finally passed, I felt hollowed out, yet somehow fuller than before. The cold was gone, replaced by a warmth that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. I've never told anyone about that moment, not even Lily or Cassandra. It feels too personal, too sacred somehow. But since that day, the house has felt different. The strange occurrences continue. Just last week, I found a collection of river glass arranged in a perfect spiral on the kitchen table when I came down for breakfast. But they no longer feel threatening. Whatever entity shares this house with us, I've come to believe it's not malevolent. The murder that occurred here was a moment in time, not the sum total of this property's existence. The old man, whether he's the captain, the murderer, or something else entirely, seems to have accepted us. I know how this sounds. 6 months ago, I would have thought someone telling this story needed serious psychological help. Sometimes I still wonder if the stress of the divorce and single motherhood has fractured my grip on reality. But Lily sees these things too. We've both learned to live with the unexplainable. The Waterfront Victorian. I was so desperate to own, came with an unexpected roommate. And somehow, in this house where terrible things happened, I found more peace than I've known in years. I can't explain it. I don't think I want to, Story 22. I still get chills thinking about that morning in Bandon. I've never told many people about this because, well, who'd believe me? It's been almost 15 years now, but I remember every detail like it was yesterday. Some things you just can't forget, no matter how much you might want to. We'd moved to Bandon, Oregon when I was 16. Dad got a job at the lumber mill and Mom thought the coastal town would be a good influence on me after I'd gotten into some trouble back in Portland. Nothing serious, just typical teenage rebellion stuff, but enough that they thought a change of scenery would do me good. Our house was this modest 2-story place about half a mile from the beach. Not right on the water, but close enough that on quiet nights you could hear the waves. The property backed up against this small stretch of woods, not deep enough to get lost in, but dense enough that you couldn't see through to the other side. About 75 yards into those trees stood this old abandoned cabin. It was falling apart even then, roof partially caved in, windows broken out, porch sagging. Dad said it used to belong to some old hermit who died back in the 80s, and nobody ever claimed the property. I never liked that cabin. Something about it just felt off, like it was watching you when you looked at it. Mom always said I had an overactive imagination, but there was something genuinely unsettling about that place. I avoided going near it, even in daylight. We had this border collie named Max who'd been with us since I was 12, smartest dog I've ever known. Max was always so calm and well-behaved, never barked without good reason, never caused trouble. That's what made that morning so strange. It was a Tuesday in late October. I remember because I had a history test that day I hadn't studied for. It was still dark out, maybe 5:30 in the morning, when Max started going absolutely ballistic downstairs. I'm talking frantic, desperate barking, something I'd never heard from him before. It wasn't his normal someone's at the door bark. This was primal, terrified. I stumbled out of bed, groggy and confused. By the time I got downstairs, my parents were already at the back door. Mom was in her bathrobe trying to calm Max down, while Dad had grabbed the flashlight he kept by the door. "What the hell's gotten into him?" Dad muttered, pointing the beam out into our backyard. Max was at the glass sliding door, hackles raised, barking and growling like he was facing down a bear. His whole body was rigid, teeth bared. I'd never seen him like that. "There, look." Mom suddenly pointed toward the edge of our property where our gravel driveway disappeared into the tree line. The flashlight beam caught what looked like the back end of an animal darting into the woods. My first thought was a bobcat. We'd seen them in the area before, but something about the way it moved didn't seem right. It was low to the ground, but I don't know how to describe it. Jerky, unnatural. It moved quickly but awkwardly, like something pretending to be an animal. "Probably just a coyote," Dad said, but he didn't sound convinced. Max wouldn't stop barking, scratching frantically at the glass door. "I'm going to take a look," Dad said, sliding the door open carefully to keep Max from bolting out. "Stay inside." Of course, I didn't listen. I slipped on my sneakers and followed him out, keeping a few steps behind. The October air was freezing, and I remember how weirdly still everything was. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just this heavy silence that seemed to press down on everything. Dad swept the flashlight across the tree line, but didn't see anything else. After a few minutes, he shrugged. "Whatever it was, it's gone now. Probably more scared of us than we are of it." The sun was just starting to come up, painting the sky this sickly grayish-pink color. Mom had finally gotten Max to calm down somewhat, though he still whined at the door. Dad went back inside to get ready for work, and Mom started making coffee. "Come back in, Liam, it's freezing," she called to me, but I didn't move. Something felt wrong, really wrong. You know that feeling when you're being watched? Like a pressure on the back of your neck? That's what it was like, but 100 times stronger. The woods had gone completely silent. Not even the usual morning birds were chirping. Just this absolute stillness that made my skin crawl. I took a few steps toward the tree line, drawn by some morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. That's when I heard it. This sharp, raspy, gasping sound, like someone struggling to breathe through a throat full of gravel. A harsh, wet inhale, followed by this rattling exhale. It came from the direction of that abandoned cabin. I froze. My whole body went cold. The sound came again, this choking, desperate gasp that no human or animal should be able to make. It reminded me of my grandfather in his final days, fighting for each breath, but much more deliberate, like whatever was making that sound was doing it on purpose. I should have run back to the house right then. Any sane person would have. But for a few seconds, I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, staring into the trees where the cabin stood. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows through the trees, and in one of those shadows, I swear I saw something move. Not like an animal moves, more like how a spider moves, all angles and jerky precision. I caught just a glimpse of something pale shifting position behind a tree near the cabin. Then the gasping sound came again, closer this time, and that broke my paralysis. I ran back to the house, nearly tripping over my own feet. I slammed the sliding door shut behind me, hands shaking so badly I could barely lock it. "Liam, what's wrong?" Mom looked up from pouring her coffee, alarmed by the expression on my face. I couldn't find the words to explain what I'd just experienced. How do you describe a sound that makes your insides turn to ice? How do you explain the absolute wrongness of whatever made that noise? "Nothing," I managed. "Just cold." Max was still agitated, pacing by the door and whimpering. He wouldn't go near the windows facing the backyard, which wasn't like him at all. Dogs know things we don't, and Max knew something terrible was out there. I went to school that day, failed my history test spectacularly because all I could think about was that sound. When I got home that afternoon, I walked straight to the edge of our property and stared at the cabin in the daylight. It looked normal enough, just a dilapidated old structure slowly being reclaimed by nature. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been there, watching our house, watching me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept my window shut tight, even though my room was on the second floor. Around 3 in the morning, Max started that frantic barking again. I heard my parents get up, heard my dad cursing as he went downstairs. I pulled the covers over my head like a little kid, too terrified to look outside. The next morning, Dad found strange marks in the soil beneath my window. He said they were probably from a raccoon, but raccoons don't leave handprint-like depressions in the ground, and raccoons don't have long, thin fingers. For the next few weeks, Max refused to go into the backyard alone. He'd do his business right by the door and then scramble to get back inside. Eventually, things seemed to return to normal. Max calmed down. The woods didn't seem quite so menacing, and I started to convince myself I'd imagined the whole thing, but I never went near that cabin again. Not once in the 2 years we lived in that house before I left for college. Years later, I was browsing some obscure internet forums late one night. You know, the kind where people share their unexplained experiences. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just killing time. That's when I came across a thread about something called the rake. The descriptions made my blood run cold. A pale, emaciated humanoid creature that moves in unnatural ways, known for watching people while they sleep and making distinctive breathing sounds, sharp, raspy gasps. The accounts mentioned how animals react violently to its presence, how the woods go silent when it's nearby. Every detail matched what I experienced that morning in Bandon. I've spent years researching similar encounters since then. Most are dismissed as folklore or creepypasta, but there are too many consistent reports from people who've never heard of each other, spanning decades and continents. People who describe the same creature, the same sounds, the same feeling of absolute dread. I'm 31 now, living in Seattle, hundreds of miles from that house in Bandon. I have a normal life, a good job in tech. I should have left this all behind me. But sometimes, on quiet nights when I can't sleep, I still hear that gasping sound in my head, that deliberate, raspy breathing that no living thing should make. I've never gone back to Bandon, never want to see that cabin again. But I often wonder if it's still there, if whatever was making that sound is still lurking in those woods. Watching, waiting, breathing in that horrible, choking way. Last month, my parents sent me a box of old stuff they'd found while cleaning out their attic. Buried among my high school yearbooks and report cards was a sketch I'd completely forgotten about, something I must have drawn soon after that morning. It shows the edge of those woods and the outline of the cabin, and in one of the broken windows, this gaunt, pale face with hollow eyes. I don't remember drawing it, but seeing it again brought everything back with perfect clarity. The silence in those woods, Max's desperate barking, and that gasping, choking sound that still haunts my dreams. I burned the drawing that night. But I can't burn the memory, and I can't shake the feeling that someday, whether in Bandon or here in Seattle or wherever life takes me, I'm going to hear that sound again, and this time it won't just be watching.